City News Time, 9 o'clock.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 27th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 11 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Police in Ottawa are busier than they were last year with the number of calls up. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
It's almost across the board in comparison to last year. Property offenses up 31%. Violent crimes, including assaults, sexual violence, and uttering threats, up by 9%.
We're also seeing a major increase in impaired driving cases. So far this year, 648 people have been charged with impaired driving, compared to 457 people in this time last year.
Interim Police Chief Steve Bell tells the board meeting of the Ottawa Police Services there is one outlier, though.
As of September 20th, we've seen 48 shootings this year, which is a 25% decrease compared to this time last year.
However, while shootings are down and generally, though, on pace for pre-pandemic levels, gunshot injuries are way ahead of last year's pace. Chris Curries, City News.
City News Time, 9:01, and now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have some wet weather at times. The high just 16 degrees. Risk of thunderstorms today, too, for today and tonight. 9 degrees for the low, and tomorrow cloudy, slight chance of showers, and the high just 13. For today, the high 16.
And right now, 11 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. The latest help for power restoration in Atlantic Canada after Fiona barreled through comes from Hydro One. 30 crew and 10 bucket trucks left Cornwall this morning for Truro, Nova Scotia. They'll be dispatched from there to other parts of that province. Now, the military says it has what it needs to help clean up after Hurricane Fiona. Hundreds of military members on the ground now in Newfoundland, PEI, and also in Nova Scotia. This Rear Admiral says a Joint Task Force Atlantic was around when Hurricane Juan devastated Nova Scotia, and says lessons were learned during the response to that hurricane. Response units have kits with heavy tools that are ready to go.
And we work hand in glove with the municipalities in order to take tasks on that involve clearing away of debris, and then we work with the municipalities in order to get it loaded onto trucks and to get it hauled away. It's really a case of many hands make light work. We've got the right equipment for those teams now.
Now, Rear Admiral Brian Santaparia says Quebec and New Brunswick governments didn't ask for any aid from the military. They're able to clean up without their help. Now, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a statewide emergency as the Sunshine State braces for Hurricane Ian. That storm roared ashore in western Cuba early this morning and is threatening to hit Florida's Gulf Coast. ABC News chief meteorologist Ginger Z says it's a calm morning today, and they've got 48 hours before the chaos begins.
FEMA loading 360 trailers with more than 2 million meals as 5,000 guardsmen from the state are being activated. Several schools and universities canceling class. Long lines ballooning at supermarkets. Shelves cleared of the essentials. Throughout Florida, gas station lines also swelling as people either gear up to stay or to get out.
They say mandatory evacuation. It's time to go.
Most storm models predict Tampa and St. Petersburg could be in for their first direct hit from a major hurricane in 101 years. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So this morning, I sat down to write a note to myself, and I dated it March 27th of 2020. So how's your morning going? Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. And look, thanks for listening. Maybe I don't say that often enough, but I mean it when I say it. Coming up, she is the MPP for the riding of Carleton. Progressive Conservative Goldie Ghamari was part of a protest here in Ottawa this week. protesting what's happening in Iran. We touched on this last week with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton. Large protests, violent protests, led by women. They've been taking place in Iran for the better part of the last 10 days or so, sparked by the death of a woman named Mahsa Amini, beaten to death by that country's so-called morality police. The story goes that she had some hair showing outside of her hijab, so they beat her to death. 22-year-old Kurdish woman. Iranian officials, according to news reports this morning, are now saying that these protests are the work of troublemakers hired from abroad, and that special courts will be set up and no leniency will be shown. So again, demonstration here in Ottawa this weekend. Goldie Ghamari was there, and she'll tell us why. That's coming right up. 9:06 on the Rob Snow Show. After the 9:30 news, it's the professor. Ian Lean from the Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, with us every Tuesday morning with his take on all the current events of the day. And today we're going to talk about what's been going on in financial markets, what it could mean for our economy, what it could mean for your pocketbook, most importantly. Because these are crazy times. I mean, how crazy? Well, I never thought that I would see the governor of the Bank of Canada doing a Twitter video explaining why he is raising interest rates.
Inflation is too high, and that's affecting all Canadians. It's particularly affecting Canadians on low incomes and Canadians with fixed incomes. It is important that we get inflation back down so Canadians can plan their spending and their saving, and they don't get surprised by big changes in their cost of living. So yes, it can seem a bit counterintuitive. We're raising interest rates, which is raising the cost of borrowing when other costs are going up.
It's counterintuitive. Tiff Macklem says, Governor of the Bank of Canada, on the Bank of Canada's Twitter account. That's where we are. Look, forget the stock market. That's not where the action is these days. It's not meme stocks anymore. It's all about currencies and interest rates. It's about higher interest rates and lower currencies. Big write-up in the New York Times this morning about this. I mentioned last week, how the Liberals, they keep beating up Poilievre about Bitcoin. And I advised Poilievre to fire back and ask the Liberals why a Canadian dollar buys less and less every day. The Loonie is barely hanging on to 73 cents U.S., It's lost 8.5% of its value in just the last 6 months against the U.S. dollar, at a time when inflation is running at 7%. It's a terrible combination. As Professor Charlebois points out in the newspaper this morning, he was on our show last week, the self-proclaimed food professor from Dalhousie University. This is really going to hurt people this winter when Canadians go shopping for groceries, because we import so much food during the winter months, food that has to be bought in U.S. dollars with a weak Canadian dollar. But we'll ask Ian Lee about this, because it's not just a Canadian thing. I mean, yesterday it was all over the news. British pound. I mean, the euro is down 18% against the U.S. dollar this year. It's all U.S. dollar strength. It's one of the things we'll talk about with Professor Ian Lee again right after the 9:30 news. We will also cover the municipal election campaign this morning. I'm looking forward to this. We have some candidates for mayor, not the candidates that are in the news media all the time and have been declared by the news media the front runners. So coming up later in the show, we have Mike Maguire, and we have Param Singh. Might be joined by someone else. We have out active invitations right now. It's not a debate. It's just a conversation about big city issues, because It's a big city, and we've got some big city issues. The local paper is going hard with police and crime this morning. I think we covered off that topic on this show in some detail over the last few days, if we go back to Friday. But we'll talk about the police budget, this move to defund the police. Going to talk about public transit, OC Transpo. Noah took the bus to work today. Okay, our technical producer, Noah, took the bus to work today.
I can't recommend it.
From Nepean. So from Nepean to Thurston Drive down here in the South End. Took you how long? Left at 7 o'clock, got here at quarter to 9.
Yeah, about an hour and 45 minutes.
An hour and 45 minutes to get the bus to work.
When I drive, it takes 15.
In the morning, on a Tuesday morning, hour and 45 minutes. How many transfers was that?
Just one.
Just one transfer. Still took an hour and 45 minutes. But does that route go to Sudbury first, or? Taxes. We'll talk tax. Like, what's the sweet spot for a property tax increase now? The rate of inflation served Mayor Watson and that city council pretty well, but now the rate of inflation is 7%. So property taxes, housing affordability, what's the plan to deal with that? How about bike lanes? How about like $250 million worth? Bike lanes. We'll talk about that. All coming up between 11:30 and noon. Also on the show this morning, my friend on the right side of things, syndicated columnist Michael Taube. Seeing these polling numbers for the Conservatives. All the polling firms have been coming out with their research since Poilievre took control of the Conservative Party. Okay, there's a new permanent leader of the Conservative Party. His name is Pierre Poilievre. Let's go call 1,500 Canadians and see how they feel. Who are they going to vote for now? A few days ago, Main Street Research had a poll. Had the Conservatives at 41%. 41%. Unheard of in recent memory. I mean, 41%, you're talking, it's Prime Minister Poilievre with a big majority government. As my liberal listeners scurry under the bed, crawl into the fetal position. It looks like this: Conservatives 41, Liberals 33, and NDP vote collapses down to 12. As all those working class votes go blue. This morning, Angus Reid Institute. Conservatives by 7. Conservatives 37. Liberals 30. NDP 20. Since late August, the Conservative Party of Canada has led in every poll released by all the reputable polling firms in the country. We're going to get into that as well. The verbal attack on Pierre Poilievre's wife and the, response from some people in the news media. But I don't remember them saying, but Chrystia Freeland. All coming up with Michael Taube this morning. And I'm stuck in the middle with you. And happy to be there. Between 10 and 11 o'clock, we'll do the talk back hour at 750-1310, 750-1310. 613-750-1310. This morning, we're going to talk about the Freedom Convoy. All of these many months later, with all of these travel restrictions coming to an end. When you think about those 3 weeks of winter in Ottawa, started in late January, didn't end until the third week of February, all brought to you by the Freedom Convoy. How do you view the Freedom Convoy now? It's 7 months later now. Did you never support it and you still don't support it now? Did you support the Freedom Convoy at first? But then you changed your mind. Because the protesters didn't leave. They wore out their welcome. Or did you support the Freedom Convoy then and you still support it now? We'll talk about that during the Talk Back Hour. No honking on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Closed captioning is brought to you in part by Raven Reads. Unbox Indigenous voices. Subscribe today at ravenreads.org.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
The story when the RCAF said Mach 2 fighter, 2 place 1,000-mile range, the British said it was impossible. The Yanks tried twice and failed. They said, you're dreaming. We said, fine, we'll build it right here in Toronto. And now you guys, my guys, are saying that it can't be done, that they were right?
Now that's the rocket that we used to get the model up to speed, and then the onboard sensors tell us that...
Come on, baby.
Damn it! But we did it according to your specs. The specs have changed.
We did it.
Arrow 201. You cleared for takeoff.
We did it!
Although the government cancelled the project and destroyed the prototypes, the Avro Arrow remains for Canada a world benchmark in aerospace achievement.
Enjoy the fresh outdoors. Play an important role in the lives of school-age children. Get paid to make a difference in your community. Become a crossing guard. We are currently recruiting crossing guards for the school year. We offer a competitive wage with various perks and opportunities for bonuses. Join the Ottawa Safety Council in keeping kids safe in the nation's capital. Find out more at crossing-guard.ca.
Join me next time on Simply Cooking by Chef, where I'm going to show you how to make a traditional pizza and even a gluten-free one, all from scratch.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
There have been protests all across Iran for the better part of a week now, closer to a week and a half. More than 40 people have been killed. They were sparked by the death of a woman, Mahsa Amini, 22-year-old Kurdish woman who died after falling into a coma following her detention in Tehran by Iran's morality police. So there was a protest in solidarity with the demonstrators in Tehran. It was held here in Ottawa this weekend. One of the attendees here in Ottawa was Progressive Conservative MPP for the riding of Carleton, Goldie Ghamari, joins me this morning here on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, it's
okay.
the events for what's happening in Iran is it's affecting I think the entire Iranian population around the world.
You're very passionate about these issues, Goldie Ghamari. For people who aren't aware, tell me where that comes from.
So I'm Iranian Canadian. I was born in Iran. My parents immigrated here when I was a year old. And the reason they came to Canada is they wanted to raise their daughters in a free and democratic society. And the people in Iran don't have that opportunity. They don't have that freedom. Mahsa Amini was a 22-year-old young woman who was brutally murdered at the hands of the illegitimate and terrorist Islamic regime in Iran just because she wasn't wearing her compulsory hijab properly. And there are only 2 countries in the world where hijab is compulsory and mandated by law. The first one is Iran. The second one is Afghanistan. And up until the Taliban took over, hijab was not compulsory in Afghanistan. And so with the brutal murder of Mahsa Amini, Rob, this was basically the spark that fueled the fire. There's no freedoms at all in Iran. The country is incredibly rich with oil money, but the vast majority of people are poor. Inflation has gone through the roof. I mean, I know we're talking about inflation here, but in Iran, the situation is 10 times worse. Unemployment is huge. We have a highly educated young population. I think over 70% of young Iranians are highly educated and have university degrees. But after they graduate, there's no job. And when they try to go to the government to ask why, they're thrown in jail. If they speak out against the government, they're thrown in jail. And all of these various issues have come together now. And I think the brutal murder of Mahsa Amini was the straw that finally broke the camel's back.
Okay, but we've seen these kinds of uprisings and protests against this is Islamic Republic before, and they're brutally crushed. This is a country with a theocratic government that is not above shooting protesters in the street. I mean, it's brutal. There's every anticipation that they're going to do this again. So do you really think this is a turning point? What do you think could happen here, Goldie?
I mean, it's hard to say. This time around, it feels a little bit different. Even the last round of riots and protests that happened 2 years ago, the Iranian regime shut down the internet for 3 days and they murdered 1,500 people. This time around, they've shut down the internet, but people are still rioting. And what's different about the riots this time is that they're being spearheaded by women. Typically in the past, it would be young men on the streets, but now we are seeing images in Iran that we have not seen in 43 years, since before the revolution. Women are walking around without their headscarves. They're burning their hijab, young women, old women. And there's a beautiful, a very poignant video that I found, and I posted it on my TikTok. It's this older woman. She is wearing the hijab, and yet she is holding the hijab in her hand, holding it over a fire, and she's waving it around, and she's chanting death to the dictator. Iranians, we are religiously diverse. We are culturally diverse, we are ethnically diverse, and we are politically diverse. But there's one thing that unites us as Iranians, and that's our love and our love and desire for a free and democratic Iran. And young people are joining up together, and they're chanting on the streets, we would rather die, but if that means we can take our country back, we'll risk it.
Okay, the Prime Minister yesterday announced Canada is going to levy sanctions on dozens of Iranian individuals and entities, including this so-called morality police. What did you think about that announcement yesterday from the Prime Minister?
I think it's a good start. So what I'm going to say next, this isn't coming from me personally. This is what I've been hearing from Iranian Canadians who have approached me at rallies, and I'm just here to share their thoughts and opinions. So one of the things that a lot of Iranian Canadians have said to me is, as they find out that I'm a politician, they ask me, well, why hasn't your government frozen their bank accounts? or why hasn't the government looked into those people who are affiliated or associated with the Islamic regime and done anything about them? And there's a very interesting article from the Toronto Star that was written in 2011. And the article is titled, "Canada is a Haven of Choice for Iran's Regime Elite." And I'm just going to read this quote. So the Toronto Star article basically says, "There are numerous accounts in the Iranian community of the Islamic Republic elite and their families making Canada their home and investing hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate projects in Toronto and elsewhere, spreading their illicit wealth, pernicious influence, and menacing networks in our country. This may be a benefit to the economy, but it is clearly a security threat, and it is a grave insult to the many Canadians of Iranian origin who are victims of this same elite, not to mention the millions of Iranians fighting for democracy." So this is a sentiment that's shared by numerous Iranian Canadians, and this is what I'm hearing on the street. So I think what Trudeau did is a great start, but I think there's more that needs to be done. And Canada, I think, should be working with other global leaders to shut down, maybe embassies around the world, or refuse to give the people affiliated with the Islamic regime visas so that they can't leave the country. Keep them there so that they can answer for their war crimes.
Okay, what about the IRGC? This is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. There have been calls, including there was a 2018 resolution that passed through the House of Commons, overwhelmingly to designate the IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization. So far, the Liberal government has not done that. Should it do that?
100%. Absolutely. They are terrorists. They are a security threat. I mean, Iran it's well known as a state sponsor of terror. And they're absolutely a terrorist group. They're a terrorist organization. They're terrorists against their own people, and they're terrorists for the rest of the world. So absolutely. And that's why I unapologetically refer to the regime in Iran as the terrorist and illegitimate Islamic regime in Iran.
Okay. Goldie, Ghamari, thank you so much for this morning, for sharing your perspective, your background, and what you're hearing from your fellow Iranian Canadians here in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving this some airtime, Rob. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, Goldie Ghamari, Progressive Conservative MPP. The riding is Carleton. The news coming up, and then it's the professor, Ian Lee. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
One in 3 fatalities on our waterways is caused by impaired boating. Don't boat impaired.
Hi, I'm Meg from AIM Fitness, and I'm here with my buddy Fit Finley. Join us every week for Fit Over 50. We'll take you through some low-impact and high-intensity workouts designed to improve your strength and your balance. All you'll need is a resistance band, some light hand weights, and also your water bottle and a sturdy chair. Tune in right here on Rogers TV and let us be part of your weekly routine.
Focus better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet here in Ottawa we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, September 27th. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 12 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa Police Service Board has heard crime is on the rise again in the city. After the rates dropped during the COVID pandemic, that rate now beginning to rise again with restrictions lifted. The service says the overall crime rate in the city up 22% so far this year compared to last. Hydro One, the latest to send crews to Nova Scotia to get help with the power to get that back on after Fiona. 30 crew and 10 bucket trucks left Cornwall this morning at 6:30 for the 15-hour drive. There are still tens of thousands without power in Nova Scotia. Hydro Ottawa crews had already left over the weekend and yesterday in order to do their part. Now, the latest storm is Hurricane Ian. It made landfall in western Cuba today, lashing that island with rain and wind as high as 200. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says Ian hit Cuba early this morning, and that country had moved about 50,000 people away from the storm's path. Florida is already getting heavy rain from Ian. It's expected to intensify into a Category 4 hurricane before its most damaging winds hit the peninsula on Wednesday. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
He's back. The professor, Ian Lee, Associate Professor of Management of the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, I hope all is well in your world.
Busy teaching, dealing with students, and tomorrow morning my first round of assignments come in, and I turn into a grading machine because I do not use TAs to grade because I'm teaching fourth-year students, and I can't use fourth-year students to grade fourth-year students.
Okay. Well, it's good that you're earning your dollars. It's just a shame that those dollars are worth less and less as the days go by, it seems.
That's right.
We have kind of two big themes that I want to ask you about and how it could impact our listeners' pocketbooks. We have rising interest rates that everybody knows about, but also falling currencies. Major world currencies are declining in value when measured against the U.S. dollar. Big story in the New York Times about it today. Now, the Canadian dollar's recovered somewhat this morning, but it's still down 8.5% in the last 6 months. When I last spoke to Sylvain Charlebois out of Dalhousie University, the food professor, said it's going to make finding bargains at the grocery store much more difficult this winter because we import a lot of food, for example.
I agree.
So what are some other examples, and why is this happening to us?
Let me jump to the second one because it's going to affect certainly anything imported. Very big picture metric because, I'm evidence-based. This is StatsCan data, of course. About 1/3 of our GDP is imported. Now, that's not just food. That's everything. Tractors, John Deere tractors for farmers, cars, parts, chips for computers.
Electronics.
TVs. We don't make TVs in Canada. And large amounts of food. So about 1/3 of our GDP. And I want to remind everybody yet again and again and again, GDP is the totality of all the wages and all the salaries and all the incomes of all the full-time and part-time people and pensioners in our country. So when you hear someone saying, well, we talk too much about GDP, it's not important, what they're really saying in plain English when you decode it is your salary is unimportant. So to those people who say that, I tell them my salary is very important, and I don't think it's big enough. I want it to be a lot bigger, but unfortunately it isn't. And when I go to the LCBO or the grocery store, I am paying with my money, which is part of GDP, to buy those groceries. And I think buying groceries is important. So I don't trivialize GDP or the people who earn their salaries in our country. But to the larger issue, I think what we're living through is just a phenomenal, fascinating, when I say phenomenal, fascinating period. Rob, very quickly, for about the last 35 years, since I started teaching in the late 80s, since I started my PhD in 84, I have read endless, forests have been cut down. Many, many forests have been cut down to print all the books and all the articles that have talked about the decline of America. The rise of China. It was only a question of time when China was going to surpass the United States and take over the United States. And then Xi and Putin have been giving speeches for the last 10 years about the long-term collapse of the United States. And it's been encouraged by people inside the United States and in universities that, I will use the phrase that Lenin once used, useful idiots in the West, who have talked about the decline and collapse of democracy and the decline and collapse of America. And so what happened in the last 9 months? It was put to the test. How so? Somebody called Putin, because, hey, they're on the ascendant, because they're stronger. Their way of life, their system of a very centralized system is vastly superior. Xi said so in many, many speeches. So did Putin. And large numbers of people and pundits in the West agreed. Mr. Trudeau himself said he had an admiration for the Chinese model. He said that 5 years ago. So I'm not just picking on Trudeau. There's many, many people who have expressed those kinds of thoughts, both professors and think tanks and elsewhere. And the overarching message is China and Russia are rising, America is declining, and eventually they're going to rule the world in some way, shape, or form as superpowers. Okay. So that's been the narrative, the overarching meta-narrative for the past 30-odd years since I've been in the academy as a PhD student and then as a professor.
The best days of the United States are behind it.
And there's lots of Americans who said that.
Empire in decline.
Empire in decline. The decline and fall of the American empire. There have been books and movies.
Sure.
So what happened in the last 9 months? Somebody called Putin, we all know the story, invaded Ukraine because they had this very powerful system, the Russian military, backed up by the might and the strength of the dynamic Russian economy, and the Ukrainians were going to collapse within 36 to 48 to 72 hours. We heard that. There were people in the West saying, oh, those poor Ukrainians, they're just toast. Now we know what's happened. All of it was a sham, a scam. All of it was noise and nonsense. The Russian Empire was a paper tiger. It was rotten right through and through, riddled with cancer throughout. The Russian military, the Russian bureaucracy, every aspect of it. And China is doing a strategic retreat. They're seeing what's going on, and they're saying, oh, my God, we've been hitching our star with Russia. And they realize they
You don't think they are anymore? You don't think they are anymore?
No, they're backing off. They're saying they shouldn't be made at war. And they're backing off because they understand that the vast majority of China's exports are going to the West, meaning the U.S. and Europe and Canada. Okay, but we're a much smaller country. And so my point, here's my larger point that I'm making.
Right.
The belief has been that a highly centralized command and control system is superior to the very noisy and boisterous, decentralized democratic system of governance. And I've been arguing for 35 years that's nonsense.
Okay.
That there's the hierarchical command and control is a very rigid system, and it's very inefficient. Sorry, Mr. Trudeau, inefficient, not efficient. And it hides, because they suppress information, it hides all kinds of strategic weaknesses because they very carefully control the data. Ironically, Putin's invasion of Russia made manifest to the world and transparent the rot and the failures of command and control systems. So what's that got to do with currencies?
Right.
Well, currency reflects. I had this guy out to my class, 15 years ago, and he was a senior vice president of risk analysis for, I think it was General Electric at the time. He was a German, spoke I don't know how many languages, really smart guy. And he said, look, there's many, many variables you can look at, but the one he says I like to look at because it's sort of an uber metric, a meta metric that sort of captures the totality of the efficiency of an economy is the currency. And the currency is always a binary relationship with another currency. So we talk about the U.S. dollar against the euro, the U.S. dollar against the Chinese RMB.
Right. Yeah.
When a currency is going up over time, that reflects the underlying strengths, plural, of that economy.
Sure.
And when a currency, we're not talking day-to-day blips. We're talking long-term. Because if you remember, Chrétien back in the 90s was saying the weak dollar, the declining dollar, was a sign of strength. And this is preposterous. When a country's currency declines over time, like Argentina or Turkey, it's because of the weaknesses in that country. What this is doing right now, because the Russian invasion exposed all the rot and all the horrors.
I guess that explains, why I would rather have a U.S. dollar than a ruble, or why I would rather have a U.S. dollar than the yuan, which is pegged anyway. But how does that explain why euros have declined, or why the pound has declined, or why our currency has declined?
Okay, you're a rich guy. I mean, you want to stay rich. I've always had this assumption. I'm not rich, but and I mean people with lots of money, billions and millions. They want to stay rich. It's a peculiar thing about rich people. They don't want to lose their money and become poor. They don't think being poor is a lot of fun. So they want to keep their money. So there you are with a lot of money, and there's many places of the world you can put your money. You can invest it in the Middle East. You can invest it in Egypt. You can invest it in Russia and China. Now, if you had a lot of money and you look at the 195 countries in the world at the UN, or 200 countries, what country springs to mind as the safest of the safest relative, not to some ideal theoretical notion of good investment opportunity, relative to all the other countries of the world? What do you think is the safest country in the world, least likely for you to be have your money expropriated, or least likely for that country to collapse? Well, I would suggest that all by itself, at the top of the list, is the United States of America. And this is not for those listeners who say, oh, Ian thinks they're smarter than we are. Ian Lee never said that. I do not believe Americans are smarter than anybody else. They just learned over a long period of time that a decentralized system with many multiple competing power centers, state mayors, state governors have power, mayors have power, senators have power, billionaires have power. There's many competing power centers in the U.S. that are checks and balances on all the other competing power centers. It's the antithesis of the Chinese or Russian model, where there's this one gigantic brain, and I'm being sarcastic, at the top, where all the major decision-making bottlenecks, because Xi or Putin have to make the decisions. And they're not the big brain that they
I guess, that's great that the U.S. dollar is so strong and people have so much faith in the United States, but my gosh, it's causing a lot of pain in other countries.
This is in
the UK, who has to buy food, or pay a utility bill or whatever, they were already feeling a lot of pain in other currencies, down 20%. Like, it doesn't help.
Rob, don't interpret what I'm saying as saying, whoopee, whoopee, this is wonderful. I'm explaining analytically
why it's happening.
Why the U.S. is, because the markets are saying of gazillions of people,
what's the best bet out there? We're going to bet on America.
I'm going to bet on America because it's a better bet than any other country in the world. The market. This is the wisdom of crowds of millions and millions of people who are saying, I want to get out of my Russian rubles, out of my Chinese RMB, out of my Canadian dollars into U.S. dollars, because it's as safe as you can get. And this is the ultimate expression. The U.S. is the hegemon. The U.S. is the world superpower. It was not China. It is not China, and it will not be China so long as, or Russia, so long as they have these command and control systems.
We have to move along here. Let's move along. I never thought I'd see the Bank of Canada making a Twitter video with the governor, but I guess this is the world we're in now.
Yes.
Let's listen to Tiff Macklem on why he has been raising interest rates. Go ahead.
Inflation is too high, and that's affecting all Canadians. It's particularly affecting Canadians on low incomes and Canadians on with fixed incomes. It is important that we get inflation back down so Canadians can plan their spending and their saving, and they don't get surprised by big changes in their cost of living. So yes, it can seem a bit counterintuitive. We're raising interest rates, which is raising the cost of borrowing when other costs are going up. But it is by raising interest rates that we're going to slow spending in the economy, give the economy time to catch up, and take the steam out of inflation. That's going to get inflation back down. That's going to be better for all Canadians.
Okay. It's not nearly as entertaining as Pierre Poilievre's videos, but nevertheless, we're going to slow spending in the economy, give the economy time to catch up, and take the steam out of inflation. That's going to get inflation back down and be better for all Canadians. What do you think about... I know you agree with what he said.
I do.
Right? But what about just the idea that he's making a video like that?
I mean, our times have changed. I can remember when I was at the bank in the 80s, Governor Bowie was this person we never saw. I mean, we saw a photograph, a still photograph. That was it. He rarely spoke to the media, and when he did, he spoke in central bank bafflegab and mumbo jumbo, and you didn't have a clue after. It was like shoveling smoke, and it was deliberately designed to confuse and obscure and mislead you. Okay, because that's how central bankers talked in those days. We're in a much more democratic world today. In a democracy, we were democratic back then, but we didn't want our technocrats to be too transparent. But those days are gone. We expect a much more open, transparent form of governance from all of our leaders, including central bankers. So what he's done is he's going with the flow, with the times, and he's going to doing these videos. With nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
And so I get emails from people saying, how come you're defending him? You know, I'm not defending him. I'm just saying he's speaking truth to power. Yes, I've criticized him because they put rates down too low. I've said that. We should never have gone down to 1/4 at one point.
Too low
and we took too long to bring them back up. Okay, that's in the past. Now we're in the present. Now we got to go forward. So what does that mean? It means we've got to raise interest rates just like the Americans because we realize we screwed up in the past. Now we're going to fix it in response to that, and we got to drive up rates, I think, into the fours. And so I criticize him for what he did in the past, but I applaud him now. If anybody says, well, you know, you got to criticize
well, the Sun editorial yesterday said he should resign. Should he resign? No. I actually think that could backfire, could create a bit of a panic, you know. And he doesn't. If we want to criticize anything about, I've already did about the fact that they took too long. The only other thing I would criticize him on was his acquiescence with Mr. Trudeau's intervention with monetary policy a year ago, when he said, I want you guys to take your eye off of your job, which is inflation, and start worrying about equity, diversity, and inclusion and fiscal policy. That was unbelievably irresponsible of Mr. Trudeau. Let's criticize the person who did it, and that's the Prime Minister, who's ultimately responsible for ensuring or demanding that the Bank of Canada get out of its lane and not do its job, to use Belichick's famous two lines. Okay, we'll be right back.
That's the criticism.
We'll be right back. Professor Ian Lee is with us here, Sprott School of Business at Carleton. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
We're in infinity. Hi, my name is Isabel. I'll be performing as part of Encore Ottawa 3. I hope you can tune in and catch it on Rogers TV.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
I started playing softball when I was 5 years old. I loved it because it was all about having fun with my friends, and it still is.
From little kids to adults to seniors, softball is a sport for everyone. Join us.
Just more of a push for Indigenous languages being heard, seen, whether it's in the media or just on signs on the road. Culture and language is such an important piece to reconciliation, and I feel like that's the goal that I want to see. So just more Indigenous languages being lifted and promoted and encouraged and spoken and just heard.
Do you have something to share? Let everyone know about your next meeting, your need for volunteers, or your fundraising event on the Rogers TV Community Billboard. Send us your words and we'll bring them to life on Rogers TV and rogerstv.com. When it's time to spread the word, go to rogerstv.com to add your announcement to the Community Billboard.
Hi, I'm Sahai from The Wiggles, and this is my new book, Something in Common. Join me on an adventure as a camp counsellor helping some amazing children make friends and share what family means to them. I wrote this book with my friends at Children's Aid Foundation of Canada to help children who might feel lonely or like they don't belong. Not everyone has the same type of family, but we all have something in common. Download Something in Common for free.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
It's changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Back with Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. I really want to ask you about this student loan thing in the United States. Can we jump into that right now?
No.
Okay.
I'm following it closely, by the way.
Okay. So the plan from President Biden to erase significant amounts of student loan debt for tens of millions of Americans could cost, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, nonpartisan watchdog, Congressional Budget Office, $400 billion. $400 billion. One of the costliest programs of President Biden's agenda. It cancels $10,000 in student loan debt for those earning less than $125,000 a year, and $20,000 in student loan debt for students who have received what's known as a Pell Grant, which is for low-income families. So people will say, well, you know, President Biden, the liberal Democrat, is doing that in the United States. What about us and the poor students up here in Canada? Shouldn't we get the same sort of student loan debt relief so we can get a better start in life? What do you think?
Okay. First off, let me just go back for one moment. The University of Pennsylvania, which is a top-notch university, Wharton School of Business, their budget model estimates it's going to cost over $600 billion over 10 years. So there are some, and there are others who say that $600 billion is low because it doesn't compute the knock-on effect. But I'm not going to make an argument that the government cannot afford it. I'm not going to make that argument. I am going to argue they shouldn't be doing it.
Why?
Now I'm going to explain why. And sorry for the academic jargon, but it's a moral hazard argument.
Moral hazard.
Not all students who go to university borrow student loans. The figure I've got for Canada is only 50% of students, all university students, only 50% graduate with any, even $1 of student debt. So half of the students figure out, because they stay at home or they work part-time or 3 or 4 part-time jobs, whatever their reason, however they do it, half of all of our students graduate without borrowing student loans.
Right.
There's the moral hazard argument.
Okay.
If this goes through in Canada or the States, you would be, as a student, a future student, you would be an idiot not to borrow.
No, but I have moral hazard is more about if I bail you out now, then what's going to stop you from failing again? You know, you're going to want to bail.
If you bail out students today, then students tomorrow are going to say, "Hey, look, you bailed them out before, so I'm going to go out and borrow up the wazoo as much as I possibly can because I know that a future president is going to wipe out my debt."
Okay.
Now, for those of you who say, "Oh, you're so savage and uncaring, Ian," no, I'm not.
Well, you kind of are sometimes.
Hang on. No, I'm not. We should be doing it through. Now, the Americans, and the data is very clear on this, they redistribute as a percentage of their economy a lot less money to low-income people than we do. We have much higher rates of taxation. You pay higher rates of tax at much lower income levels than do the Americans because we redistribute money from the top 2 quintiles to the bottom 2 quintiles far more so than the Americans. So if the president or anyone is really worried, and I understand they are, and I completely understand their concern, because the poor in the United States really, really are poor. I mean, compared to Canadians. I'm not trying to say that poor people in Canada are rich. I'm saying that they're way better off than poor people in the States. And I've got hard data showing that, by the way, for anyone who wants to argue it.
Don't take your eye off the ball.
So what they should be doing, what Biden should be doing, is saying the problem is not university tuition or debts. The problem is low-income people. And so we're going to announce an increase in, you name whatever, however you want to redistribute it. It can be a child tax credit.
Right.
It can be just a low-income subsidy or transfer, excuse me. And so you can use the tax system, call it a negative income tax, call it a guaranteed annual income, call it an increase in the minimum wage.
Yeah.
There are many ways you can redistribute income. And I think that this is a bad way to redistribute income. That's the first reason I gave you, is moral hazard. It's going to encourage every future student to borrow up the wazoo. The second reason
Thinking the government is going to forgive it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
And the second argument is that the stats show very clearly that the people that make the highest average incomes are the people that go to university. So what we're saying is this is a demand by privileged people like Senator Warren and other senators in the states who want to ensure privileges are passed on to the next generation. So it's privileging future privilege. This is crazy. Why? If you want to help low-income people, redistribute income to low-income people and not to people who went to Harvard or any university and has thereby earned and had obtained a much better paying job upon graduation. Don't subsidize the rich. This is like universal pharmacare where you say, let's get free drugs.
How fair is it to previous generations who went to university, took student loans, paid off the student loans?
Precisely.
Right.
Exactly. So target low-income people who are still low-income, and that's where the problem is, and not give free student loan forgiveness to people who are going to become high-income people or higher-income people down the road when they graduate. It's misguided and misdirected.
I'll tell you what, you look at some of the tuition rates, though, to attend the universities that aren't the state universities.
Yes.
I mean, it's extraordinary. The tuition. I don't know how anybody affords to go to university in the United States.
I'm not here to defend those rates because I think they're high too, but just let's very quickly
like
for your
$70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year to go to school.
Hang on just a sec, Rob. So everybody understands, they don't have the Canadian model. We have all our universities, almost all of our universities are public.
I know.
And they're paid for by government, okay?
Heavily subsidized.
$10,000 per student per year full time. But in the States, you have a multiplicity of universities. You have private universities for profit. You have private nonprofit like Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And then you have the state universities. The state universities are much more modestly priced, $8,000-$10,000 U.S. tuition, which is pretty close, if you ignore the exchange rate, pretty close to Canadian tuition fees. It's the private universities, but that is a very deceptive number when you hear 50 or 100,000, because students who have outstanding grades from poor families basically don't pay. They will get tuition scholarships or waivers. And so the rack rate, let's use the hotel language from the hotel industry. The rack rate is not the actual rate you pay always. Now, if you're just an average student from a very comfortable family, you're going to pay the rack rate for sure.
Right.
But if you are a really gifted, really smart kid from the ghetto, you're going to get, and there's all kinds of examples of this regularly, they rebate and give scholarships. By the way, we do it too. We give scholarships to students with really high grades coming in from high school, like 97, 98%. We give scholarships. So not everybody pays the rack rate.
Not everyone pays the rack rate. Okay. All right. We'll have to wrap it up on rack rates. Thank you.
Okay.
Speak next week. Bye-bye. Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School at the very affordable Carleton University. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The houseless crisis, because it really is a crisis down here on Rideau Street. There is not enough shelters for men especially, and we need to be helping our most vulnerable.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
I'm Mallory, and I was walking home one night when an impaired driver hit me. He had been overserved in 2 bars before getting behind the wheel. If the servers would have called him a cab instead of serving him more alcohol, my life would be the same as what it used to be. I think servers play the biggest role in keeping us safe because it's up to them what state the person's in when they leave. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law.
20 bucks. And Maggie, Mrs. Calabash, come into my kitchen. A quick mayonnaise. egg yolks, garlic, Dijon mustard, lemon juice, olive oil, immersion blender. Go down, come up, voila, mayonnaise. Bum, 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 bum. $20. $20. Yeah.
You like what you see. Hi guys, my name is Vi and I'm a part of Encore Ottawa 3. My set at the Meridian Theatre is coming out this week and I hope you tune in.
It's been 2 years later still. Rogers TV presents a series of original creative stories animated by local authors for children of all ages. Join us for Ottawa Storytellers.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 27th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, it's 12 degrees. In Smiths Falls, also 12. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. More help for Atlantic Canada from our region as it recovers from that major storm. Some 30 people and 10 bucket trucks left from Cornwall. These are Hydro One workers. This morning, they left at 6:30, headed for Nova Scotia. Crews will help restore electricity to areas of that province affected by Hurricane Fiona. Hydro Ottawa did send crews on Sunday and yesterday to help out. City News reporter Kevin Meisner has the latest on the rebuild as well as a high-profile visit.
The military is now helping out with chainsaws in efforts to restore electricity in Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland. 400 soldiers fanning out, clearing away downed trees covering power lines. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be in Sydney, Cape Breton today to survey the damage, then will make a stop on PEI. In Port aux Basques, Newfoundland, over 75 houses have been torn apart, reduced to pieces, or are structurally unsafe. Andrew Parsons is a provincial member of the House Assembly for the region.
Right now, we are dealing with the immediate of making sure people have roofs over their head, food, things like that. But going forward, we have a lot of people that are displaced.
At least 3 deaths are confirmed across the Atlantic provinces in the storm. Damage from Fiona could top $300 to $700 million. That would be the most expensive natural disaster in Canadian history. Kevin Meisner, City News.
Now, the latest storm is going to be affecting Florida. The governor, Ron DeSantis, has declared a statewide emergency as the Sunshine State braces for this powerful Hurricane Ian. Right now, it's a Category 3 as it hit the western end of Cuba. It is then expected to gain strength to a Category 4 hurricane by the time it hits west central Florida coast late tomorrow. ABC News chief meteorologist Ginger Z says residents lined up for hours in Tampa. They were there to collect sandbags.
Tampa Bay preparing for a worst-case scenario. If they take a landfalling major hurricane, it will be the strongest storm for Tampa in a century. In Hillsborough County, lines to fill sandbags were long. Some folks waiting an hour.
It's very scary. Lots of unknowns. We don't have gutters in our house. I'm very concerned about the flooding and the rain.
Now, U.S. President Joe Biden also declared an emergency already that authorizes federal emergency departments to coordinate their disaster relief and provide assistance to protect lives and property. City News time 10:03. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have some wet weather at times. The high just 16 degrees. Risk of thunderstorms today, too, for today and tonight. 9 degrees for the low. And tomorrow, cloudy, slight chance of showers, and the high just 13. For today, the high 16.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 12 degrees. Some of the country's best-known brands in retail are calling on the federal government to bring in a tourist tax holiday.
You know the brands Aldo, Burke's, Harry Rosen, Hudson's Bay Company, Cadillac Fairview, and several others. They're calling on the federal government to implement a visitor tax refund program to help stimulate the economic recovery. Now, the Alliance originally submitted this proposal back in July. July as part of a consultation for the federal government's tourism growth strategy. The group says the pandemic affected many industries, including tourism, hospitality, and retail, and the proposed program would allow international shoppers to reclaim the goods and services tax and provincial sales tax on their purchases. The group says a tourism tax holiday would enhance international competitiveness of the tourism sector, which would also now be bolstered by a strong value on the U.S. dollar and the removal of COVID travel restrictions. At the City News Business Center, I'm Mike Epple.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
I want to know your views all of these many months later. Some 7 months later now. On the Freedom Convoy. Did you never support the Freedom Convoy and you don't support it now? Did you, if you think back, did you support it when you first heard of it, but then when it rolled into town, you kind of changed your mind? Especially after the protesters didn't leave? Or did you support it then and it still enjoys your support now? I'm just curious. 750-1310, 750-1310. 613-750-1310, Talkback Hour. I guess I would call it Reflections on the Freedom Convoy at 750-1310. I wanted to get into this morning with you, just given the news yesterday about the Trudeau government now getting ready to end most of the COVID-19 travel restrictions. And some people think that's a terrible decision, actually, that those restrictions should remain in place and COVID is not over and the pandemic is not over and people are still getting infected from COVID all the time and they're ending up in the hospital all the time and people are still dying from COVID all the time. But others say it's time to move on. It's about time. Even the President of the United States, Joe Biden, liberal Democrat, right, told 60 Minutes, COVID is over. COVID is over. It's time to move on. We have people taking a victory lap, right? Maxime Bernier is taking a victory lap. Pierre Poilievre is taking a victory lap. He says this never would have happened if it wasn't for the constant pressure being applied on the Liberal government by the Conservative opposition. And in fact, one of his Conservative MPs, we have a clip of this, Michael Barrett from the Leeds-Grenville area, Leeds-Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, has a Twitter video expressing that sentiment. We won. That the Conservatives won. This is a victory for the Conservatives. Roll tape on that, please.
This is just a quick message to say thank you to every Canadian who wrote or called their MP calling for an end to the unscientific vaccine mandates, the mandatory use of ArriveCan, the testing requirements, the isolation requirements, the quarantine requirements that were based only on political science and not based on medical science. We're going to keep fighting for you to make sure that this government does not continue to issue the $6,200 fines to people at the border. We're going to continue to fight to make sure that people who paid those fines get their money back. And we're going to keep standing up against a government that is intent on dividing Canadians instead of focusing on what they should, and that's making life more affordable, making sure that Canadians can heat their homes and feed their families. So thank you. Thanks for,
All right.
thanks
So
for being
there's,
involved, raising your voice.
That's a Conservative MP, Eastern Ontario Conservative MP, Michael Barrett. So the Conservatives are taking a victory lap. And you know what? There may be some supporters of the Freedom Convoy who feel like taking a victory lap, even though the Freedom Convoy is long gone from this city and has been gone for more than 7 months. But, it's another step towards normalcy with these restrictions coming to an end. And my gosh, it's been a long time. Long 2.5 years, a very long 2.5 years. And I'm telling you, just right from the heart, as long as I live, I will never forget those 3 weeks in this city, from late January to the third week of February of 2022, when the that Freedom Convoy rolled into Ottawa. And I'm not saying they're all fond memories. But many, many months have passed. Okay, 7 months and 7 days since those protesters were cleared out of downtown Ottawa. And what was once an occupation zone became a ghost town. But the effects of those 3 weeks are still with us in this city in many, many ways. One reason I think Councillor McKenney is enjoying such political success with their campaign is because they were everywhere during the Freedom Convoy. And I think built up a lot of name recognition, a lot of goodwill in parts of the community, being in the newspaper all the time, on the radio, on the supper hour news, showing leadership when there seemed to be a vacuum of leadership in the city. In fact, for a long time, didn't the city government seem paralyzed? Just didn't know what to do about the predicament that it was in. Because it was unlike any other protest we had ever seen before in this city. Hey, Mark Sutcliffe, Bob Shirelli, great people. Lots of respect. Didn't have the same kind of profile or, really any profile during the Freedom Convoy. What was one of the biggest news stories of the year? Biggest news story in recent memory for local news. And I think that's one of the reasons why Councillor McKenney has a lot of political momentum right now. Could be the next mayor of Ottawa. A lot of residents in Ottawa wanted someone to fight for them. And McKenney did. Anyway, I could get nostalgic and go through the good and the bad and the ugly personally, but what I want to know, maybe I'll write a book about it someday, I don't know. I want to know, it's been 7 months now since this thing was busted up here. All of those months later, what are your feelings about how that all went down? Freedom Convoy. 750-1310. Bruce, Ottawa. Bruce, you're on City.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
It was a very divisive move, I think, and really divided two camps.
Yeah.
And I think it's time we move on. Maybe we could take something from it, though. The protocol that the city used and the federal government used. Maybe we can learn from that. But other than that, it was
the
just
what? The what? The what? Sorry.
The protocol. The
protocol. The Emergencies Act. You mean?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And, maybe we could learn from that and move on.
And move on. Okay. All right. You want to move on. But do you feel, though, that, like, for example, when it first came to Ottawa, were you behind it, or did you support it, or, and then it kind of soured on you, or were you opposed to it from the beginning, or?
I was curious, and I wanted to know I wanted to know the story because I was hearing the media outlets talking about it. How chaotic it was, and I didn't recognize that when I was down there, and I was down there for 7 days. I walked through the crowd, and nobody was accosting me, nobody was yelling at me. It's kind of funny. The panhandlers had a dollar amount they wanted us to give over. It was like, could you spare $5? And I found that kind of funny.
Okay. All right. Okay. Interesting, Bruce.
Other than that, it didn't get violent, I think, till the police were called in.
Yeah, well, even then, I mean, people were arrested. There were some kind of, I guess you could say harsh takedowns, but, was it violence? Did we have, tear gas and rubber bullets and, the city on fire? We didn't have any of that, right? Even when the police moved in. Derek in Ottawa. Derek.
Good morning. morning, Rob. Going to be unpopular with you, but yeah, I'm totally supportive of the Freedom Convoy. I think they
Even now?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Even now?
Absolutely, because if you recall, back at that time, the governments were still clamping down after the Freedom Convoy. I mean, first of all, it was ridiculous that these truckers were being forced to quarantine. I mean, how are they spreading COVID when they're driving in a truck? But anyhow, but yeah, if you recall, after the Freedom Convoy came, very short time later, the Ontario government really, dropped most of their mandates. The federal government moved towards it and whatnot. I think they had a huge impact.
Well, I mean, it's been 7 months. It's been 7 months for
now.
these
But what I mean is the Ontario mandates fell a short time later.
Right. And do you think that was because of the
I
truckers?
think there was political pressure, absolutely. I think people were sick and tired of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and the other thing, too, is I thought the way Trudeau handled it was terrible. I mean, to instantly label people and whatnot as opposed to at least communicating. I mean, my wife's of East Asian descent, and they're supposed to be racist and misogynist and stuff. She went down a few times. She was never accosted. She's like 5'0"
Right,
I mean, she wasn't treated poorly or whatever. I mean, I went down.
But what about the way they behaved while they were here?
Generally, it was very good. There was a few
with the honking and all-night honking and fireworks.
That's what I was going to get to. The only thing was the horn honking, yes, because for local residents that would definitely be a negative.
Yeah.
But the nut bars, I mean, as I said before, I mean, there's been Canada Day celebrations or whatever, and then some idiot goes and urinates on the War Memorial or whatever. You can't control, huge crowds, but generally, like I went, truck to truck. I talked to some of the guys. One guy was in tears. He was about to lose his truck because he had some health issue and he couldn't do his job and whatever. There was real life stories there. There was one person had a poster up there. Their kid was forced to get vaccinated and ended up dying because of it or something. So, I think they were just trying to give the point of freedom and stuff. And the governments did react. They heard that. They saw the winds of political opinion changed, and they dropped a lot of their mandates.
I think so. Okay. All right. So Derek says he's, all for Freedom Convoy, even still to this point. Okay, that's interesting. This is why I ask these questions. Joanne in Orleans. Joanne.
I supported it then, and I support it now.
Really? Okay.
I agree with everything the previous.
So if like they rolled back in and occupied Wellington Street again, you'd be down with that?
It depends what their cause would be now.
Right.
It was legit then. It was mandates. It's a very serious thing that the government forces you to do something. So I that's where I stand. I was uncomfortable with some of the tactics. Noise, 24-hour, not fireworks, but noise and exhaust. That is seriously unpleasant.
Flooding 911, clogging highways, slowing down rush hour traffic, slowing down things on the airport parkway. This kind of stuff.
Peaceful protests, they're still uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They still are going. That's the whole point, is that they get your attention by disrupting.
Yes.
But it was a model of how to do a peaceful protest, and I think it was very representative. It was just not representative of downtown Ottawa. I mean, people whose salaries were never interrupted, didn't miss a day of a check or a pension benefit. They have absolutely no idea what private industry is like.
Yeah.
They certainly have no appreciation for a trucker's lifestyle. But I'm not thinking of it in terms of COVID restrictions and was it a success or not? Did it did it get the message across or not? Media conspired against them. They only had a few people who reported.
Well, I don't think the media could conspire if they had two people meeting in a telephone booth. I don't think the media could launch a conspiracy.
I guess what I mean, a better word would be they're all drinking from the same pond, so they all had the same attitude except for.
Right.
But I think of this truckers' protest in terms of Iran. They are having a disruptive, socially profoundly disruptive, peaceful protest over there.
Yeah.
And ours is light years more.
But I mean, by the end of it, it's like the city was under siege, Joanne. I mean, it was really. I didn't recognize Ottawa. I thought, like, where the heck is this? Like, this is crazy,
Did you go?
Go. I drove around it every day, every morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I drove around there, went to the ballpark. I went everywhere. Sure.
Yeah. See, like the previous caller, my son went down several times. First time to see, because he was hooked and thought, I'm fed up as a university student, what's happening. I'm healthy. I'm young. I'm going to fight this virus on my own. I don't want to be mandated by the university.
Okay.
He went down the first time, and then he went down 2 more times because media had so demonized the people who were there that he had to see for himself. Did it change? Did something happen? Is there a new group? He went again to do his own recognizance. And no, what he found was there was the same people, same atmosphere. He said it was like Canada Day. So maybe downtown was under siege, maybe. And yes, it was disruptive. Yes, it was uncomfortable. I didn't appreciate that exhaust fumes or noise could, pose health hazards to the residents. So tactics aside, that was another conversation. Don't do that again. But it was a model peaceful protest. And that's why they brought their children, because they had no intention.
All right. I got you, Joanne. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Gosh, we usually agree on many things, her and I. 10:20, interesting conversation so far. Freedom Convoy reflections 7 months later. Rob Snow Show, City News.
You see a lot of these luxury rental apartments that are coming out, and if you're a single person, it makes it extremely challenging to afford just basic lifestyle needs.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
The Canadian film and TV industry recognizes it's time to build a better workforce, which includes more opportunities for Black, Indigenous, and persons of color. HireBIPOC.com is here to help make this happen. Whether you're already in the business, trying to get a start, or in a position to hire, HireBIPOC.com could connect you to the right people. From script to development, production to post, distribution to marketing. Check out HireBIPOC.com now and help build a stronger industry together.
I think that overall there needs to be kind of a change of like how we're communicated with as like the youth becomes a like part of the growing population. I think there's different ways to get the message across, and I think if they use those kind of channels, I would be inspired, and I think myself and my age group and people younger than me would be kind of more inspired to get out there and realize that like their vote would be making a change.
Our generation, we're not on the news, we're not on the radio. If you're gonna like get out to us, it's gonna be through social media. So I mean, if we saw a bit more through social media and more stuff, not trends, but just like things that actually get the youth's attention, you know? Because I remember when I was a young kid, they used to come into our schools, give us all these promises. They never followed through, but they still came into our schools.
Flooding is causing widespread devastation in Pakistan. More than 1,000 people have died. 1/3 of the country is underwater, and 6 million people are in need of emergency assistance. The humanitarian coalition is responding to the crisis in Pakistan. You can help. Donate today at together.ca, and your donation will be matched by the Canadian government. That's together.ca, the humanitarian coalition. Together, saving more lives.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
How do you view the Freedom Convoy when you 7 months in the rearview mirror? Never supported it and don't support it now. Supported it at first, but changed my mind when they wouldn't leave. Like outstayed their welcome. Or support it then and support it now. Let's talk here. Bill in Toronto. Long time no hear. Bill?
I supported it then, and I support it now.
Really?
Actually, in my mind, I think they were the ones that actually started to free the world.
Started to free the world. Wow. Holy cow.
Well, I mean, look, they started protests around the world, didn't they? And then it wasn't too long after the lockdown started falling apart.
Yeah. Well, there were other protests in other cities, and there were protests actually that were much more violent than what we had here in Ottawa. But nevertheless,
yeah.
Okay.
But my biggest takeaway is the lies that we're told.
The lies. Okay.
The lies of mainstream media and the lies of government.
Okay.
You know, they accused them of arson, having loaded guns, rape. They were all foreign funded. They were all out and out lies. CBC put out 2 articles about foreign funding, and what does Freeland do? She seizes honest people's bank accounts. They can't account for billions of dollars of infrastructure money, but they can find Granny's $20 that she gave to the convoy.
Okay. All right, Bill. Thank you. Got you, Bill.
Thank you.
Loud and clear, buddy. Yep. These are all like the Freedom Convoy listeners. Jason.
You know it.
I think you started listening to the Rob Snow Show during that period, actually.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I've been listening to you for a long time.
Long time? Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I agree with your last caller. Like, I went down there on the Saturday, I was following him. Now, first of all,
why did you go down there? Why did you go down there? What was...
Because I supported them.
You supported them, okay.
Absolutely, and I had been following the Bridget Belton. She was the one that started it, really, her and the Chris Barber. And then there was the Tamara Litchin and Pat Keenan and one Bader guy or whatever that jumped on later on. Okay. But I was following, so yeah, I went down there on the Saturday. I went down down there multiple days, but the first day I talked to like dozens of people. Like over the 3 weeks, I probably talked to well over 100 people.
Right.
Great, good people from all across Canada. Good people.
Yeah.
That like, you know, someone mentioned the divide. Like, there was a huge divide, and there were people who saw who had the stock market was going crazy. They saw that the value of their house, some cases, triple. They didn't have to go to work in the morning. They were working from home. Things were good during the pandemic for a lot of people.
Okay.
But for a lot of other people, and I would say probably a pretty big...
They felt ostracized from...
Absolutely, and they had a total... The pandemic for them, and I'm one of them, I drive truck. It was totally different experience. It was stressful. It was, it's a completely different experience. It was very hard on a lot of people.
Sure.
And I think that really got lost on many people who opposed the convoy. I think the media reports, like, I went down there the first day, Rob, and I could not. It was great. I talked to all these people.
Oh, yeah.
It was like Canada Day.
Like, I was on the radio that night when it was rolling into town. And I had people calling me from the side of the Trans-Canada Highway and calling me from overpasses and saying, I've never been political before. I've never gone to a protest before. I've never been more proud before. All of these things. But then a lot of those people called back 2.5 weeks later and were like, I'm fed up with this. I want to get these people out of my city.
And I get that. I get that. Look, I think the honking for sure. The people, it took me a while to get to this conclusion because it was very emotional for a lot of people, myself included. And same thing. I never felt so proud to be Canadian that week that they were on their way here. All the videos, the overpasses, it was like minus 40, you know?
Yeah, it was cold.
And the thousands of people coming out. And I went that morning to the overpass in Arnprior and watched them come in. I went to the truck stop, drove around, and watched them come in. There was like probably 500 people in the overpass in Arnprior. And then I remember going down there and then getting home and turning on the news, and I couldn't believe it. Like the disconnect between what I had experienced and what the story they were trying to tell. And even on your show, Rob, like almost to a person, people were calling in saying the exact same thing. They could not believe what was going on in the media compared to what they were witnessing on the ground. Now, there was all these stories about people being harassed and this and that, and I'm not saying that didn't happen. But I was down there for most of the 3 weeks, and the only harassment I witnessed was counter-protesters harassing the truckers. And you know, I was thinking about this the other day. We're talking about what's going on downtown Ottawa, and those idiots that were at Tupac. I went down to check out Tupac because I wanted to see for myself.
Of course you did. Yeah.
I wanted to see for myself because when I first read about it, they were saying it was like some investor from London and and they were saying, "Oh, it's a freedom convoy, freedom convoy." It wasn't just freedom. Those weren't freedom people; they were homeless people. You know what I mean? And I talked to some people, and they were like wacko, crazy conspiracy people, like the UN was flying in planes to fucking do. You know what I mean?
All right. We gotta go. We're a little late for the news, and you're starting to get loose with the language. So I gotta jump here. Let's stop. 10:29. Talkback hour. Freedom convoy. Recollections. 7 months later. It only seems like yesterday. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Join me next time on Simply Cooking by Chef, where I'm going to show you how to make a traditional pizza and even a gluten-free one, all from scratch.
I mean, policing in every community is going to be challenged. The community policing model is already a harm reduction response to the way that they police. I just think that we have, again, another opportunity to use police for the things that police should be used for, and then develop some other avenues for things that we can take off a police officer's plate, because it's just not what they should be doing.
Back in, okay?
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Focus better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 27th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa, cloudy and 13. In Smith Falls, it is 12. And here's what's making news this hour. Hydro One crews are on their way to Nova Scotia this morning to help get that province connected back to its power grid. Over 30 storm responders and 10 bucket trucks left Cornwall at about 6:30 a.m. for the 15-hour drive to Nova Scotia. The crews join Hydro Ottawa crews. Those left yesterday, as well as hydro crews from around the country and the northeastern United States in the power restoration efforts after post-tropical storm Fiona swept through the Maritimes. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is also traveling to PEI and Nova Scotia today, where he'll inspect the extensive damage caused by the storm. Meanwhile, another hurricane has made landfall. Ian tore through western Cuba today as a major hurricane with nothing to stop it from intensifying into a catastrophic Category 4 storm before it hits Florida tomorrow. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says there is a 100% chance of damage and tropical storm force winds and waters along Florida's west coast and has expanded its hurricane warning in preparation for U.S. landfall. And today is the last day for Ottawans to cast their election ballot in the special advance voting. Residents, regardless of where you live, can go to any of the 9 special voting stations stations around the city to vote today until 8 p.m. There will be 2 other opportunities to vote early on October 7th and 14th. Election day is October 24th. City News time is 10:33. I am Damilola Unime. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
We're talking about the Freedom Convoy, kind of Freedom Convoy recollections, and reflections. And how you view the Freedom Convoy now 7 months later. Did you never support it? Don't support it now? Supported it at first, but then soured on it? Or supported it then and support it now? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. I remember when I first heard this protest was coming to Ottawa, it was Ruth in Canada called. I've met Ruth a few times at protests. Been out covering protests, and there'd be Ruth. And she told me about this Freedom Convoys coming to Ottawa, Rob. It'll be there in like a week or so. And I was oddly intrigued because I've seen some big protests in Ottawa. And I thought to myself, and I think I even said this on the air at the time, well, that sounds like it's going to be quite a spectacle. Remember, back when this thing first began to circulate on social media, they were talking about like 30,000 trucks coming to Ottawa. And I was like, where are they going to put 30,000 trucks? And I also said it's not going to take 30,000 trucks to create a lot of chaos downtown. Even if it's, say it's not 30,000, say it's only 300. Where are they all going to go? And now we know. Along Wellington and just about every side street in Centertown. And we were on the air that first weekend and then the second weekend, the third weekend. And I remember being on the air with Mark Day, our news director, that first Saturday. And him reporting in the freezing cold downtown that it did kind of have a Canada Day atmosphere to it, a carnival atmosphere, according to Mark. I remember he was reporting right from the scene. And as I said to the previous caller, I had people calling who lined the highway and lined the overpasses and said they'd never been political people before, never attended a protest before, but felt really proud as those trucks came running past. But those were the early days. And they were supposed to come and have a protest and go home. I certainly think the police thought they were going home. Because it didn't take long for the police to regret rolling out the red carpet and let Ottawa's newest infill project spring up in Centertown. And it didn't take long for everyone to realize, you know what? When they say they're not going anywhere, they actually mean it. But again, early days. Those were just early days. Now we're 7 months removed from all of that. Dave in Ottawa South. Dave.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure, Dave.
I agree with your previous supporters.
Yeah. Why is that?
Supported the convoy now, supported it then. I would say my primary impression was being very disappointed and with the attitude of the Prime Minister from the get-go.
Okay.
His complete denial of giving any attention to the protest, which I considered represented the population. I wouldn't say as a whole, but a large cross-country representation. Mm-hmm. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, as they stayed, which I was glad to see them stay, I was regretted the action that was taken to chase them away. But had the Prime Minister relented and listened to them, listened to their demands. Or demands isn't the right word even, sir. It's to say their perspective. I mean, is it not true that they were seeking to get some kind of exemption for the fact that they lived their lives in their trucks and for their livelihood?
Well, I guess they questioned if it made any sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
It's not the first time we question whether government action makes sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's. Yeah. But it was. I feel that the response was inappropriate by the government, and in the sense that it could have improved.
But I guess I want to understand something. So if the government was mishandling a file, or you felt the government was doing something that was unfair to people, and this was the type of protest that was arranged in response to it, that rolled into Ottawa with big trucks that didn't move and honked horns all night and blew off fireworks and created all kinds of chaos and bedlam in the downtown core, slowed down traffic, all of this, you'd be in favor of that again?
Well, let me address the presumption there.
Okay.
I went down to downtown Ottawa most days.
Okay. Right.
An office down there. I walked a few extra blocks so that I could walk along Wellington in support of the convoy. I didn't see the accusations that some have been made, like our soon-to-be former mayor, saying that they were defecating and things like that. That I think that was trumped up misinformation. And I dare say the media had a share in that as well, to try to, sway people against the convoy. Now, to your particular question, I think these were exceptional times. We were looking at, well over a year into
2 years. It was 2 years by that time. Yeah.
The pandemic, and we were people were asked to do all kinds of things, not go to work, queue up, wear masks. Some of it was good, but I think it got to the point. I think you have an interesting argument that at the beginning, were you in favor of the convoy? After several weeks, were you still in favor of it? I would say, was the country in favor of the pandemic, anti-pandemic control issues that were taken at the front end, and were they still as in favor so many years down the road?
Right.
Additional vaccinations mandated and things like that. So,
interesting points, Dave. Okay, interesting.
I hope
Thank
we
you.
don't ever have to go through this again.
Me either. Okay,
I hope
we agree on
learned
something.
some ways to do it better next time.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
And I support Pierre Poilievre. I think he's tapped into the national feeling of trying to do things differently.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. Nepean. Wonderful place to be in, I've heard. Glenn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, Glenn.
How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there, buddy. Just kind of reflecting on the Freedom Convoy all these months later, and want to know how people feel about it.
Okay, first off, I want to say that I had nothing to do with the trucker convoy, but I did support it. I didn't go downtown. I thought it was a nightmare down there.
Okay.
And my view on it is, I think all Canadians know this, it is legal to protest. These people came from out west.
Peacefully protest, yeah. Peacefully.
Yeah, it's legal to protest.
Peacefully
They came from out west. They organized a peaceful protest.
Yeah.
They had lots of warning that they were coming. Parliament had all the time in the world to greet these people properly.
Yeah.
They did not. All they had to do is meet with 3 of the truckers, the main people, bring them into the Parliament under guard, with police protection, and discuss the issues. If they had done that, would any
Do you think they would have left? Do you think they would have
any
left?
of the other stuff happen?
You think they would have left? Yeah.
The honking was done because Parliament Trudeau wouldn't meet with these people.
Yeah, I don't.
Everything that happened after was because Trudeau wouldn't meet with these people. Then they found a fall guy, the police chief. Probably the best police chief this city has ever seen.
I don't know
put the blame on him. Put the blame on everybody else.
You think Chief Soley was the fall guy?
I think that the whole trouble is solely with Trudeau, not meeting with these people.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to. I don't think I'd want Justin Trudeau or any, whoever the prime minister was at the time, anywhere near such angry protesters, sir.
That's why I said take 3 of the leaders and bring them into the Parliament buildings under guard and have the discussion with the leaders. Would the other people have honked their horns? No, the horn honking started after they were refused.
And I mean, there were these back channel things that were going on that we've learned since. There were some back channel things going on that we've learned since.
Well, everything that happened after was a disaster. I agree with that.
All right.
But it's not the truckers' fault.
Not the truckers.
The truckers tried to have
They bear no responsibility at all for the way they behaved.
And Parliament refused to have it with them.
Okay. All right, Glenn, thank you.
That's my view on it.
Gotcha.
And I'm sorry that the government turns their back on their people. I'm feeling very Indian in my own country right now.
Okay, not sure what even that means. Okay. Pat in Ottawa. Pat.
Rob, how the hell are you?
I'm good, Pat. Thank you. Yep.
Excellent. So I think a majority of the callers that have called in previous to myself here have all been drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
The convoy had racist undertones from the get-go. Have no idea how to peacefully protest in any way, shape, or form. I did not support the convoy in its creation. I did not support the convoy as it traveled, nor will I ever.
Okay. Why is that?
Why? Just because it's completely unfounded.
Unfounded. What's unfounded?
What's unfounded? Their beliefs. Their beliefs in how the vaccine is a brainwashing tool. Is that the government has to listen to them, and there's got to be 20 or 30 different reasons out there that I could cite with the proper time. And these people are all just yahoos. I don't understand it. And anybody with a head on their shoulders living in Ottawa did not want that convoy here.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have called me this morning from Ottawa. You say none of them have a head on their shoulders?
No.
No?
Anybody who's called in previously to this
are a bunch of yahoos and yobs and rednecks and racists and...
I wouldn't call them necessarily rednecks and racists because that would be branding just like they do.
Okay.
But at the same time, when these people are sitting here saying all these things like, oh, Trudeau didn't do this and it's Trudeau's fault, like, come on, Rob.
Okay.
The island of sanity is shrinking very quickly and everything like that, but I mean, like, you can't give the squeaky wheel the grease all the time.
No, I'm just wondering if how people are feeling all these months later about this thing, so...
Anybody who I know who has to travel into Ottawa to work, anybody I know...
Well, I was one of them, sir, yeah.
Well, exactly, sir. And so, Rob, I'd ask you, how was your commute?
It was... Well, I come in pretty early, so it didn't really bother me, but I can understand how people who were affected by it. There were people who were affected, but look, there were times when I looked around the city and I thought, this is just surreal. There were times when I was wondering if it was going to turn violent. There were times I was worried that it was going to turn violent.
And so did a lot of people, and a lot of people were fearful of that, and these people did nothing to mitigate that whatsoever. And if you look at all the other protests that have occurred within the city that were actually peaceful protests, they were nothing like these guys. They were not as disruptive.
Okay.
They were not defecating. And I think it's another miracle, Rob, that a majority of these people who say they went down there all the time, I don't know, maybe they need a new prescription or something, but to say they never saw anybody being accosted, to say they never saw the defecation, the urination, the mess, the disruption downtown.
Did you?
I mean, I did, yeah.
You did? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like it was disgusting. And like when people say, oh, this never happened, it's just the media inflating all of this. Again, like if you're going to have an argument, you have to listen to both sides. But when these people are just constantly saying, "Oh, it's
that's what I'm trying to do,"
that's bad-mouthing us, and it's just crazy, Rob. I don't know how else to say it. Like I've been listening to you now for between you and the Island of Sanity before you there. Like it's been damn near 35 years that I've been listening to you guys.
Right.
And it's just getting. I don't know what's happening to the city, but people are just throwing up their hands and saying, you know what, like, enough's enough. And frankly, like, the police chief didn't jump in fast enough. And everybody nowadays just has to look at this and say, okay, if you want to peacefully protest, by all means do so. But if you look at any of the other protests that came into town, they were all, like, scrutinized a hell of a lot more than these people were. Look at the Occupy Ottawa movement that happened 5-6 years ago.
Right.
They weren't allowed to erect any structures whatsoever. They could put up tents, and if they tried to erect something, people swooped in right away. That never happened with the convoy.
Okay.
You know, like, there's a double standard here, and people from the convoy need to realize, like, they were given a pretty big carte blanche and were given quite a lot of passes and buys in regards to what they could or could not do versus everyone else.
Okay. How many members of Occupy Ottawa had their bank accounts seized?
I don't know how many did. You know, like, and then Tamara Leach saying, oh, woe is me, I need my money for my lawyers, while everybody else who's suing her for the trauma endured downtown, like...
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. I'm just trying to get both sides out there, Pat. I'm just trying to get, you know, I'm playing devil's advocate.
I hear you,
okay?
but I, like I said, I figure I'd be the one, at least one caller to call in and say, you know, everybody please shake your heads over.
All I can do is ask the questions, sir. I can't, and try to referee the responses. That's my job. 10:49, Rob Snow Show, City News.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet here in Ottawa we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
We're in infinity. Hi, my name is Isabel. I'll be performing as part of Encore Ottawa 3. I hope you can tune in and catch it on Rogers TV.
Are you a woman experiencing abuse? Do you know a woman experiencing abuse? Help is available any time of day or night. Sheltersafe.ca is an online map that helps you find a women's shelter or transition house that meets your needs so you can live a life free from violence. Sheltersafe.ca. Help is just a click away.
On Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa, we'll tell you all about the Festival of Small Halls. They have a great lineup this year happening throughout Eastern Ontario. We'll give you all the details on that. And Flora Brewing Company is celebrating their 5th anniversary. Owner David Longbottom will join us on the show. We'll tell you all about the celebrations they have planned, and maybe we'll even sample, I don't know, a couple of beers. All that and more on Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa.
I'm Julian Armour from Music and Beyond. Join us for a new show this spring on Rogers called Music and Beyond Presents.
Enjoy the fresh outdoors. Play an important role in the lives of school-age children. Get paid to make a difference in your community. Become a crossing guard. We are currently recruiting crossing guards for the school year. We offer a competitive wage with various perks and opportunities for bonuses. Join the Ottawa Safety Council in keeping kids safe in the nation's capital. Find out more at crossing-guard.ca.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
My gosh, lots of calls on this today. I'm kind of surprised. I don't think we'll fit them all in, but we'll try. take who's been waiting the longest here. John in Ottawa. Hi, John. Hello, John.
Me?
That's you, John.
Okay,
yes,
I'm Jack. Okay.
Oh, John, Jack.
Okay, well,
Jimmy,
I'm
Joe.
calling
Go
because,
ahead, John. Yep.
Okay, I'm calling because I disagreed with any people that said that the COVID was false.
Right. Okay.
And I believe that the needles were great to have.
The vaccines. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was important.
Okay.
And the people that were demonstrating, I don't think they really cared. I think they wanted no needles.
Right. So when it came to the Freedom Convoy, you were against that.
Oh, yeah, I was, yeah.
You were. Okay. All right, Jack.
Yeah,
okay.
because they weren't portraying any kind of freedom. They weren't portraying any kind of truth. They were portraying some kind of falsehoods.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Jack, thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Sir. Yeah, and sharing your opinion. Downtown, David.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, David.
I was neither for nor against the convoy. Like, I'm sort of against protests altogether, where you inconvenience people, because I don't think they do any good. They just make people upset.
Right, okay.
I would say, coming out of it, looking back at it, that you can't help but think that maybe they feel partially validated or vindicated, and that this pandemic seems to have ended on its own. There was no goal reach where all of a sudden they said, okay, we're done. It was Joe Biden announced it just sporadically, it's done.
Yeah,
and
on 60 Minutes.
For a lot of people, it was done months ago, because we were going full bore for the last 5 or 6 months. And that was only maybe a month or two after this whole thing took place. So, I can't help but think that they might feel that maybe they were partially right, that there was, people aren't being really pushed for vaccines anymore. People just seem to be going about their life, and this pandemic, per se, seems to have kind of like faded like, steam on your bathroom window. I don't foresee, any sort of further uptake, in seriousness with this. But anyway, as I say, just looking back, this thing about, where they say, well, the city was under siege and the city was shut down. Outside of a 10-block square area in downtown, I'm sure a lot of people didn't even know it was happening outside of hearing the horns at night.
Okay.
So as I say, I'm not supporting it nor being against it. I just think that maybe I don't think it would have had any effect whether they came or not.
If they want to take some credit for the ending of these mandates.
Well,
whatever.
It can look that way, but what if this Freedom Convoy thing hadn't happened? It would have. I think we would be in the same place we are.
We'd be
now
where
anyway.
we are anyway.
Although a lot of people are kind of thinking, well, yeah, this seems to have ended on its own, and maybe what they were saying were kind of right. So maybe they were in the right place at the right time, but wrong for a lot of people in this city.
All right, David. Thank you. Yep, that's a call from downtown Ottawa. Doug is in Centertown. Doug.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me, Rob?
I hear you, Doug. Yep, go ahead, sir.
Great.
Yep.
I was just listening. I've never called in before, but when I was listening to the first half hour or so, I couldn't believe my ears.
Why is that?
I live on Kent, and I was right in the middle of the occupation.
All right.
First of all, this business about latrines and defecating, there were 3 latrines within our block. 2 of them were ice fishing huts set up on Kent Street. The other one was built out of building materials right underneath our window. I'm on the 14th floor of a condo. I don't know exactly what they were doing in there, but they were latrines. They occupied Kent Street from Somerset basically right up as far as they could go. I think they were blocked at Queen by the police.
Yeah.
But my biggest concern was EMS access. I had an email dialogue open with the OPS Somerset Community Liaison Officer, Anne McKenney, and they thought, probably through the whole first week, that there was a lane open all the way up through Kent Street, and there wasn't. It was blocked completely. I would watch on it several times a day. Ambulances would roll up with police escort because I guess they figured it wasn't safe, and they would roll up to Cooper Street, and then they would decide which way they were going to go instead of going north because they couldn't. So they often would turn left against the one way and go up Cooper. The police would show up at times and just leave their vehicles and walk up, and there was a guy referred to as the block captain. He had this straw cowboy hat on. And they would talk to him, and he would shake his head. No, you're not going up. So they would either drive away or go on foot up Kent Street. About around 2007 on Lyon Street, which is a block over west, there was a fire, and 6 or 7 townhomes were really damaged. If that had happened on Kent Street, I have no idea it would have been brutal. So it's just infuriating.
I know. I remember taking my wife downtown, right, I guess where you live, because my wife is fairly new to the Ottawa area, and I toured her around Kent Street and all through that area. So she could get her bearings and understand, like, this is where ground zero is for this movement. Yeah. And she could not believe her eyes, how these trucks and RVs, it wasn't just trucks, it was like RVs, fifth wheels,
they had
vehicles of all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, and it was ridiculous. Our church, St. Patrick's Basilica, you know, there were burn barrels in front. So you go into church and you could smell gasoline and smoke. My biggest issue, though, was EMS and the fact that the OPS we were basically abandoned by the OPS for 3 weeks. And as far as McKinney goes, everybody likes to portray McKinney as some sort of hero. She spent years, along with Menard and Leeper, demonizing the police. And do you think that had an effect on the police reaction to this? I think it did.
You think so? Okay,
anyway,
that's an interesting angle.
It's infuriating to hear
all
this stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting hour, to say the least. News. Yes, the 11 o'clock news, and then Michael Taube, syndicated columnist on all things Poilievre this week. And great polls for the Conservative Party. That's next on City News.
Hello, I'm Jim Deeks, host of Canada Files. I hope you'll join me each week for interesting and informative discussions with some of Canada's most impressive people.
The houseless crisis, because it really is a crisis down here on Rideau Street. There is not enough shelters for men especially, and we need to be helping our most vulnerable.
It isn't the heavy trays that make the job difficult, or the fast pace you need to keep up. It's not working another double because someone called in sick. What makes the job tough is the moment you realize a customer has had enough, and you have to make that decision not to overserve. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law. We know it's not easy, but we're counting on you to keep us all safe. Thank you, servers, for doing the tough job.
Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., it's the Rtv Quiz. Giovanni Petiti hosts a weekly trivia competition that lets you play from the comfort of your couch. Play along at home and challenge your friends. And don't forget to follow along on social media. Let us know who's top of trivia, and you can find yourself featured on a future episode.
Are you kidding me, folks?
The Rtv Quiz, Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. on Rogers TV or at rogerstv.com/RTV Quiz.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
Hi guys, my name is Vi and I'm a part of Encore Ottawa 3. My set at the Meridian Theatre is coming out this week and I hope you tune in.
It's been 2 years later, you're still...
Is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 27th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa, cloudy and 13 in Smith Falls. It is 12. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. If you want to cast your ballots for the upcoming municipal elections as special advance voting, today is your last chance to do so. City News reporter Alex Gouge has the story.
Special advance voting is being offered at 9 locations in the capital, such as City Hall, the Richcraft Recreation Complex, and the Saint Laurent Complex. Those eligible to vote can cast their ballot at any of those locations, regardless of home address. With that, City of Ottawa Municipal Elections Manager Michelle Rochette says they are also looking for more people to work the election.
So right now, things are tracking well, but I don't want to be overly optimistic and not have people that are still interested in working our election not apply. So please do, no matter what, ottawa.ca/vote and or call our office at 613-580-2660.
Those unable to vote today can still cast their ballot early at advance voting days scheduled for October 7th and 14th. The municipal election is slated for October 24th. Alex Gouge, City News.
And some Ontarians who celebrate Diwali are criticizing the fact that the province's municipal election falls during the South Asian holiday, which many liken to Christmas. Municipal election dates are fixed under a provincial act, and the government says those who cannot make it to the polls on election day can vote by mail, at advanced voting stations, or by proxy. But some argue those suggestions put their communities at a disadvantage. With the weather forecast for Ottawa and the Valley, here is City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have some wet weather at times. The high just 16 degrees. Risk of thunderstorms today, too, for today and tonight. 9 degrees for the low. And tomorrow, cloudy, slight chance of showers, and the high just 13. For today, the high 16.
City News time is 11:04. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is travelling to PEI and Nova Scotia today, where he will inspect the extensive damage caused by post-tropical storm Fiona. The Prime Minister is expected to make stops in PEI and 2 communities in Cape Breton. Meanwhile, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furry says his government will also announce a financial support package in the coming days to help people whose insurance won't cover the damage from Hurricane Fiona. The storm left a trail of destruction across a wide swath of Atlantic Canada. I am Damilola Unime. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
My friend on the right side of things is back with a syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Stephen Joseph Harper, Michael Taube, on City News, Rob Snow Show. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to hear from you.
Thanks.
Again, we're heavy on the Poilievre content this week, but he's dominating the federal political scene these days. There's no question about it. And he says he has been made aware of, quote, disgusting comments made by this fellow Jeremy McKenzie and another man where they discuss sexually assaulting Pierre Poilievre's wife. He called the men odious. He called them losers. And that he has reported the comments to the Mounties. The response in some corners has been, yeah, but, and I want to know what you think of that reaction, as though he somehow brought it on himself, or he should have been more forceful in denouncing this McKenzie character when he had the chance. What do you think of that response?
Well, no one brings it on themselves. No, I mean, no one opens themselves or opens the door to this type of situation willingly. And if there is any rare occasion when it happens, well, then the person asks for it. But in this case, no. And again, I think that unfortunately what has happened here, Rob, is that people have made the association or claim that there's some link in some mild fashion between Pierre Poilievre and his campaign and people like Mr. McKenzie who are part of what's called Diagolon, which is an online community of people and individuals I don't think we have to get into heavy descriptions of, but are just not representative of what conservatives stand for in this country.
Right.
And there is no link. There is no association. You and I have talked about this before. I've even mentioned with others. Conservative leadership candidates, liberal leadership candidates, NDP leadership candidates, etc., meet a lot of people. They don't know everyone that they're meeting, and they're not intimate with all these individuals. When you're crossing the street, when you're walking around, when you're coming off a podium after making a speech, you shake hands, you meet people, you speak with them. We don't know who they are. There's nobody going along with Mr. Poilievre when he was running the Conservative leadership campaign, holding a big binder and saying that, oh, look, this person on page 72, you can't shake his hand.
Right.
It doesn't happen like that.
Okay.
And it's nice that the political left tries to make ill will of this and tried to state that, oh no, Pierre Poilievre, maybe he didn't directly know, but he indirectly knew who they were. You know, he understood this. You know, his campaign understood it. The party understood it. Look, obviously there are going to be some people who know what this is. There are going to be some people who have some knowledge of it. There may even be some people in his campaign, not that they were associated with it, but they just knew what Diagolon was. That's fine. The vast majority of people don't. And quite frankly, Poilievre didn't have the time and probably didn't have the interest or inclination to even spend one iota of a second on it, because most of us, most normal thinking people, which whether you like Poilievre or not, he is a part of, have better things to do than worry about the lunatic fringe on the right, much like the political left, the moderate left, have better things to do than worry about the lunatic fringe on the left, because they both exist. So no. I mean, I saw the clip. I found it. You know, it's been posted on social media. You can find it on Twitter. It is thoroughly disgusting. And apparently, reportedly, Mr. McKenzie claims he doesn't remember making it or doesn't remember the conversation because he was drunk at the time. Whatever. Let the RCMP figure that out. Okay. The end result is this group did not lead to Pierre Poilievre's victory as the Conservative leadership candidate. It is utter madness to make this association. And his wife did not deserve to go through this. The comments were disgusting. The entire conversation that those gentlemen were having were disgusting. And Pierre Poilievre acted the way that any good husband would, stating that, you know, if you want to come after my ideas and policies, that's one thing. You don't go after my wife. You don't go after my family. And most normal people think that way.
Okay. Moving along, Pierre Poilievre says we won, and he's taking credit for the government's announcement that it's going to end most COVID-19 travel restrictions. So, first of all, before we get to your column, you wrote about this recently. Let's listen to Michael Barrett again. Michael Barrett is a rising star in the Conservative Party, and he represents an Eastern Ontario riding, leads Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, and this is what he put on his Twitter account. Let's listen to here, okay?
This is just a quick message to say thank you to every Canadian who wrote or called their MP calling for an end to the unscientific vaccine mandates, the mandatory use of ArriveCan, the testing requirements, the isolation requirements, the quarantine requirements that were based only on political science and not based on medical science. We're going to keep fighting for you to make sure that this government does not continue to issue the $6,200 fines to people at the border. We're going to continue to fight to make sure that people
and it goes on in that
fines.
Vein. So Pierre Poilievre is along the lines of Michael Barrett, who's kind of parroting the talking points here, taking credit. September 30th, these travel restrictions will be gone. But how much credit does Poilievre and the Conservative Party deserve?
Oh, certainly some of it. And it's not because I'm a conservative saying it. It's because they made it an issue. And then Poilievre made it an issue during the Conservative leadership race. And in one of my recent columns for the Epoch Times, I sort of list a number of things that he said at that point, showing how ridiculous Ottawa was handling it, and the fact that most of the world was bypassing us in terms of, you know, removing COVID-19 restrictions and requirements as the vaccines continued to move along, as people got vaccinated, as people continued to maintain, you know, their own safety and security, and they were careful in how they were doing things. But at the same time, people also realized that with vaccination, well, that's not the be-all and end-all and doesn't prevent you, obviously, from getting COVID-19. It did at least mean that you could try to return to a sense of normalcy, or basically a return to normal, or whatever the new normal entails that we discuss. So he certainly deserves credit for making it part of the equation. And what polling also showed, although I don't have anything sitting in front of me, is when he actually spoke about those issues, whether it was on COVID-19 requirements at the border, doing something about the ArriveCan app, which, as we know now, as of October 1st, will become optional, or just talking about passports, which is still a huge problem as of right now. And even with the removal of these last two major requirements, you know, it's going to take a while for the passport office to catch up, and they just fell way, way behind. when he talked about those issues, that being polyevra, it resonated with the Canadian public. And you didn't have to be a conservative to understand that Ottawa had handled the situation poorly. We were one of the quickest countries in terms, and one of the best countries in terms of compliance when it came to taking the primary doses of vaccine, that being shot number 1 and number 2. But when it came to removing those requirements, we were among the slowest in the world. And that's among, obviously, Western democracies. So polyevra certainly hit the mark on a lot of things. And the Liberals, who will, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who will obviously take credit for having removed this stuff, they recognize probably behind the scenes in private that, and they look at polling, they notice that obviously it was having an effect. People were basically stating that polyevra was on message and that Trudeau was completely offside. And that's why, after the federal Liberals had defended for months, over and over again, all these requirements and restrictions that Canadians want to stay safe, and those who opposed it, were calling for a completely different and extreme society. Well, as Laurie Goldstein, my old friend, who still writes for the Toronto Sun, stated recently, how, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, how interesting it is that all these comments about right-wing extremism and all that have now casually disappeared now that these requirements are disappearing. So, as always, a political narrative changes when the ones who have a different political narrative decide to intercede and move into the political narrative they've rejected and then absorb it as their own. So, yes, polyevra definitely deserves some of the credit, no matter what.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the polls. The polls are really interesting lately because all the big polling firms are out now and they're doing their samples and their surveys. Because they can put a name to the Conservative Party leader now. It's not like some imaginary person, So,
Exactly.
So a few days ago, this didn't get much media. Main Street Research, Keto Maggie's firm, Conservatives 41.
Yeah.
Right, 41. Liberals 33, and the reason is the NDP's at 12. So one would assume that disappointed NDP voters are going, they're liking what they hear from the Conservative leader. One would assume from that one poll, that's one poll, okay?
Yeah.
But then this morning, Angus Reid, another survey, Conservatives by 7. Conservatives 37, Liberals 30, NDP 20. Interesting about that one is the PPC is at 1.
Yeah.
So that would suggest people who like Mad Max and what he had to say, maybe they're, and they left the Conservative fold. Maybe they're back in the Conservative fold now. Yep. The one thing is they don't vote. The PPC usually polls higher than its actual voter turnout. So,
that's a good point. Yeah, that's correct.
Maybe it's a little closer. Who knows? But what do you think? What do you think? It doesn't really matter, I guess, but what do you think?
No. I mean, obviously, you take polls with a grain of salt, and you obviously realize it's just a snapshot at that time. But yes, it does show that there are at least two things happening, and I think you isolated them properly. One, the NDP vote has completely collapsed in the mainstream poll, which is interesting. 12% would be among the lowest the party has polled in decades. And you can certainly attribute it to two things. One, certainly, obviously, some of it has moved to the Liberal Party because that's their natural center-left. It's the natural place for the center-left to go if they want to stay on side and move over. However, there have been polls over the years, Rob, and maybe you've even discussed them on your show, that show for a sizable number of NDP supporters, their second choice is not the Liberals. It's actually the Conservatives.
Right.
Not a majority, it's a minority, but it's a big enough minority that if you get enough of them on side, you can actually do some damage in an election. And what this is obviously showing is that polyevra is doing exactly that, at least in that one poll. In the Angus Reid poll, very quickly, the PPC going down to 1 point obviously means that they are interested, at least right now, in Pierre Poilievre as the Conservative leader. They see him as a small C Conservative who may represent some of their points of view, and they're obviously more intrigued by it. So putting aside the fact that a lot of them do stay home in the end when it comes to voting, and I agree with you, that little small shift, if nothing else, by the Angus Reid poll shows that there is a potential shift available right there and then that could obviously help in a very close election if Poilievre is able to knock the PPC back down to 1 to 2% whenever the next federal election occurs, and he can recapture some of that. I believe they were at 6.1% in the last election. If he can get back about 3 to 4% of that in a tight election, that could make all the difference. So it doesn't mean anything yet, but it's interesting to look at.
But it was interesting. John Baird, longtime local MP here, who was one of the co-chairs for the Poilievre campaign, said this weekend on one of the Sunday talk shows, that NDP attack ad shows that it's the NDP that's worried.
Yes.
And this is at least one poll that would seem to suggest the NDP has every reason to be worried.
He's right.
So,
No, John Baird's absolutely right. And I noticed that too. And I sort of thought the same thing, because the fact that the NDP came right out and targeted the Conservatives, some people would say, well, they're just doing it because it's a new leader. And yes, that's a small part of it. But it's also because they realized that Poilievre, and I said it, others have said it, etc., was grabbing a lot of votes from all over the place who were not traditional Conservatives. Young voters, independents, the apolitical. That group is also part at points or at times of what the NDP collects as part of their grand tally. So yes, whether they admit it publicly or not, privately, I'm sure they're a bit worried.
But they've also just seen basically what used to be the Working Families Coalition in Ontario go door knocking, essentially, for Doug Ford.
I know.
So, and there are lots of ties there. For example, I don't know this person, Ian Todd, but reported to be Poilievre's chief of staff. And I think he was part of the Ford team for a while. And the decision
was also part of the Reform Party way back in the days of Preston Manning. He's been around a long time.
Okay. Anyway, chief of staff, it's getting rave reviews. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. So, how much time do we have? Okay, we got about 5 minutes here. Politico's Andy Blatchford writing glowing stories about the political future of Melanie Joly, our foreign minister. Okay. Canada's face on the world stage could one day take over from party leader Justin Trudeau. There is talk about turnover. She's not saying it out loud. Well, no, they're the Liberals. They like to plot behind the scenes. I don't know.
It's not going to happen.
Melanie Joly. No. First of all, Trudeau says he's not going anywhere. So, and I don't think he's going anywhere.
I don't either.
But my gosh, Melanie Joly, she couldn't even get. First of all, she did not perform very well with Rosie Barton yesterday on the CBC. Or it wasn't Rosie Barton, it was Vassie on Power and Politics. She was asked
Vassie Capello,
8 ways from Sunday about the Islamic Guard in Iran, and would you designate that a terrorist organization? And it was just ahs, danced all around it. Not a good one. But I guess just because I was here and it was the 150th birthday party for Canada, and the Canadian government had a big role to play in the big party celebration. She was the heritage minister at the time, and
that's right.
The city stuff that the city put on was very good. The stuff that the federal government was responsible for, and she was the minister responsible for all of that, wasn't very good. And I have never forgiven her. So,
well, don't forget the deputy minister who also went off to the Russia Day ceremony. That's under her watch as well.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I think we can sum this up very quickly. I don't know if you have any other topics. Melanie Joly, with no disrespect, is not being talked about, is not being considered, is not being discussed, because I've never heard a single Liberal, publicly or privately, ever say that she would be a consideration as leader. If they choose to pick her one day, that's up to them. But you're right. Based on her current record, I couldn't even see her as a top choice among the first 10, 15, or 20. Not a chance. No.
Yeah, she's a super organizer, though. That's the one thing.
Well, all right, Quebec, but there are lots who are, and it doesn't mean they're going to become leader.
Okay. Baseball. It's winding down. I think the playoffs start next week, right? So if the season ended today in the American League, I'm really only following the American League because I know you're a big Yankees fan, right?
I am. Yes.
Well, we won't hold that against you around here.
Fair enough.
Would have a bye, and it would be the Rays and the Jays, with the winner facing the number 1 seed.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do you like your team's chances and the Jays' chances in the postseason?
Well, my team's chances are decent. The problem is obviously the momentum they had early on in the season has been lost to some degree. But then again, with the starting pitching that we have and Aaron Judge in the lineup, I mean, you obviously could never discount us. The Yankees have played solid through the year. That terrible spell through the summer seems to be gone. You know, they picked up a whole bunch of wins as of late against Milwaukee, Boston, and others, and they seem to be back on track. I think that they will ultimately finish second overall in the standings in the AL, which means that the Astros will have the number 1 seed and will face the winner of who we're going to discuss next. I could see my guys certainly making it to the ALCS, which is the championship series. I don't know if they can get past the Astros. That's the only thing I would say. In terms of the Jays, they have had their issues and struggles with the Rays in the regular season, but you know, you always have to ensure that you realize that the regular season play and once you get into the playoffs, it's all completely different. Jays match up very well. They've been on a tear. The team is playing extremely well. You know, just having Vladdy Guerrero in your lineup itself is you know, makes you a pretty strong star. Manoah is pitching extremely well. This is a good team. I'm not denying it.
Yeah.
I could see them getting past the Rays. But beyond that, I don't think they match up very well against the Astros. And, you know, we can talk forever about the Astros and the whole World Series debacle from a few years ago. This team has been strong and consistently strong, the Astros, that is, for several years. I think they're the toughest team in the AL. I would be surprised if they didn't come at it. I think only my guys, the Yankees, really have a shot at it. Not because they're 1-2, but just basically in a matchup in terms of offense, defense. I think they're the only ones that can sort of suit up to them. But I think the Jays certainly have a chance to move along a little bit. The Yankees definitely have a chance to move along a little bit. But the big problem, again, is the Astros, and I just don't know if anybody can get past them.
Okay. Great stuff.
What do you think?
Well, I'll just say go Jays, go. We'll see what happens. But you're right. I mean, when you get into the postseason, anything could happen. You know,
right.
Anything could happen. They'll go as far as they're pitching, I would say, with the Jays. All right. Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure.
Yeah. We'll speak soon. Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. This is the Rob Snow Show. We'll be back. We'll talk about the municipal election campaign with 3 candidates for mayor. This is City News.
Rogers TV presents a series of original creative stories animated by local authors for children of all ages. Join us for Ottawa Storytellers.
You see a lot of these luxury rental apartments that are coming out, and if you're a single person, it makes it extremely challenging to afford just basic lifestyle needs.
My mother said we had to leave home. The communists were going to take my father away. If my parents were afraid, they didn't show us. But we would never forget our escape from Vietnam. We were lost.
What was your job in Vietnam?
University professor. We had no home.
Do you have any family in Canada?
No, sir. Nobody wanted us.
Welcome to Canada.
Canada chose us.
Canadians opened their borders, their homes, and their hearts to more than 100,000 refugees fleeing persecution after the Vietnam War.
We were home.
I'm Sahai from The Wiggles, and this is my new book, Something in Common. Join me on an adventure as a camp counselor helping some amazing children make friends and share what family means to them. I wrote this book with my friends at Children's Aid Foundation of Canada to help children who might feel lonely or like they don't belong. Not everyone has the same type of family, but we all have something in common. Download Something in Common for free.
Join me for Season 3 of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. Whew, that was a lot. I think I need a nap.
I need to know that my voice matters and feel like my opinion is going to have an impact on our society and our youth.
Join me next time on Simply Cooking by Chef, where I'm going to show you how to make a traditional pizza and even a gluten-free one, all from scratch.
When an impaired driver killed my brother DJ, some people used the A word. They called it an accident, but it wasn't. An accident implies that no one was at fault. But when someone impaired by alcohol and/or drugs chooses to drive, they're fully responsible for the crash that can result. So please, for the memory of my brother DJ and the thousands of families whose lives have been shattered by impaired drivers, let's drop the A word.
A crash caused by impaired driving is not an accident.
$20.
Hi, I'm Maggie. Come into my kitchen. When you're using salt in a recipe, check for saltiness. Not all salts are equal. A fine grain salt is a lot more salty than a large grain salt because that takes longer to get into the food. Bum, 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 bum. $20. $20. Down the
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Number 1 for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
It's Tuesday, September 27th. Good morning. I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 13 degrees with cloudy skies. Here's what's making news this hour. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is traveling to PEI in Nova Scotia today, where he'll inspect the extensive damage caused by post-tropical storm Fiona. The Prime Minister is expected to make stops in Stanley Bridge, PEI, and 2 communities in Cape Breton. Meanwhile, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey says his government will announce a financial support package in the coming days to help people whose insurance won't cover the damage from Fiona. Hydro One says it's sending around 30 workers to help restore power in Nova Scotia. More than 200,000 homes and businesses across the region are still without electricity. The workers are expected to reach the affected areas by tonight. Lennox and Addington County OPP are requesting help in identifying a suspect in a vehicle theft investigation. The suspect is described as a white man with a red beard, around 30 years old and around 200 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. And today is the last day for residents in Ottawa to cast their election ballot in the special advanced voting. Residents, regardless of where you live, can go to any of the 9 special voting stations around the city to vote today until 8 o'clock. There will be 2 other opportunities to vote early on October 7th and 14th. Election Day is October 24th. City News Time 11:32. I'm Danielle Bain for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
And between now and just shortly before noon, we are going to talk about some big city issues. In this municipal election campaign, we have 3 candidates for mayor joining me today. We have on the line Mike Maguire. Good morning, Mike Maguire.
Morning.
Param Singh.
Good morning.
Yeah, hi. Nice to hear from you. And Nour Kadri. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Yes, right.
Yes.
Good morning.
Okay. Thank you to all 3 of you for taking the time and joining us here on the Rob Snow Show on City News. So let's talk about some of the big issues. I mean, a big one in the newspaper today, for example, following this Ottawa Police Services Board meeting last night, and we've had some heated discussions here on this radio show over the last few days. Police and crime. Where do you stand? And it's not a debate. We're just going to kind of beat these issues around. But, Mr. Maguire, where do you stand, for example, on the police budget? What do you think should happen to the police budget? Should it go up? Should it go down? Do we need more police? Fewer police? Better police? Should we defund the police? What's your stance on that?
A couple of thoughts here, Rob. I was doing a little bit of research this morning. So the Ottawa Police Service is, of the big 12 cities in Canada, the Ottawa Police Service, percentage-wise, is the second lowest budget. I think that's a good indicator that we're probably either where we should be or even a little bit low. I also note there's 2,100 employees, 1,480 police officers. That's a lot of police officers. But when you look at the size of the city of Ottawa, it's not many. I tell you, my bigger issue in terms of the budget, I always go back to this. I'm a financial conservative by nature. I make a living with very abstract analysis of data and in many cases financial data. I'm looking at the recent survey came out by the Ottawa Police Service and the level of dissatisfaction within the ranks.
Okay.
So we have like a question on the front here, which is the finance, which is a good question, but I think you want to go to like, is this the real key issue for the Ottawa Police Service?
What do you mean? How the rank and file feels about the performance of the police? Is that what you mean? Or the morale in the police, you mean? Or
we look at value for money. So if you have a dissatisfied service, you're going to get less value for your money. And it also means that the people you're serving are probably not getting the same product that they want or deserve, need.
So you want to look at morale and what could be done to improve that then?
Yeah, because I don't see the budget necessarily as a big sticking point at the moment. We don't appear to be an outlier at all.
Well, I mean, for some it is. Some people think it's bloated and should be cut by $200 million, so defund the police. But let me move along here to Mr. Singh.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think should be done with first of all, the police budget? I mean, it's a major public expense. It's a core city service. It's been, a lot of cities have taken a good long look at what they think their police service should be. What do we need? More police, fewer police, a bigger budget, a smaller budget? What do you think?
I can tell you as a police officer, we do need more police officers out there.
You are a police officer?
I am still currently a police officer. I'm on leave of absence without pay since I started the election.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes, and I still talk to friends and colleagues that still work, and sometimes when you hear that they're running short again, Ottawa is a very unique landscape. You can fit Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Vancouver, and still have plenty of space left over. So because of that landscape, it makes it more harder to be everywhere. We are one of the lowest when it comes to police versus ratio, and we need to increase that number. And when I've done my door-to-door, and when I've spoken to community members, whether you're in Orleans, in the South End, or even in Canada, one thing that has been told is they need more police, they need more presence. We still have a lot of issues. So I'm looking for a balanced budget. If that balanced budget means that we need more police officers, as long as it can be explained and we can prove it, or the police service can prove it and provide factual evidence in regards to that increase, for me, that's a balanced budget. So, yes.
Okay. All right. Just on Mr. Maguire's point, Mr. Singh, morale. I mean, you come from the Ottawa Police Service, so how is morale? What do you know about that? Is it low? How could it be improved? What do you think about that?
Like any other institution, like any other workplace, morale goes up and down, depends on your leader. I think the current interim chief is doing a fantastic job. He's well respected.
Okay.
And morale, if you're also working with fewer officers and, you go call to call, that has a huge impact on your morale. So morale can be low at times, and sometimes it is, especially when you're working in these kind of environment. So we need to make sure that whether it's the Ottawa Police, whether it's the fire department, EMS, or any other city services, that they're properly sourced, that there's proper resources there, so that people can actually come in and do their work with a smile and do their work properly. I did note, just because your morale is down doesn't mean that the service that they're going to be providing is going to lack. I've worked for the last 20 years with amazing people, and even if your morale is down, we give 110% every day when they go out. I've given 100%, 110% every day.
All right.
So they do their best, and they're going to keep pushing forward too.
So, Mr. Kadri, what are your thoughts on what we should do with the Ottawa Police Service? There has been this move, defund the police. Should we have a bigger police budget, small? Should we cut the police budget, more police, fewer police? What do you think?
Well, let me first start by saying that the police provide an honorable and valuable service to society. Okay. In the vast majority of the police, they're doing a professional and effective job.
Okay.
And police in general is a respected career. My father was a policeman, and I look up to that model usually. And we need to resist the cheap and easy criticism of police based on biased views of few special interest groups. So we should be countering the media rushes to judgment without all the facts. We need to look at the facts in general. And when we look at the budgets in general, I'm a professor of strategic management in the MBA and executive MBA programs at the University of Ottawa. And from a budgeting perspective, we need to look at the needs and attach a budget based on the needs, not the other way around. This is a budget, go do what you can. And that's why we should have a comprehensive study into the overall policing framework in Ottawa. And we need to address, among other things, more integration with all police forces that are active in the National Capital Region. Remember, we are the capital of a G7 nation. That's where the federal government is. That's where most of the embassies are. So we need to have a more integrated public order, national security, law enforcement, and intelligence framework among all levels of policing in the National Capital Region.
Yeah, okay.
Because we have seen along the way some disintegration and in some situations we did not see the proper coordination between these levels. And an enhanced police professional development program for all the National Capital Region police should be there in order to promote common, modern professional standards in police practices. So those are some of the views that we are looking at in order to move the policing in the right direction.
Okay. We're joined by Nour Kadri, Param Singh, and Mike Maguire. They're all running for mayor. I want to move on to a second topic here. Public transit. $700 million a year to run OC Transpo. OC Transpo's had better days. There are lots of problems with light rail. There are big plans with light rail. The service is running a big deficit, $85 million. Ridership is not recovered anywhere near what the city council expected when it passed the budget, which was ridership was supposed to be north of 80%. So, Mr. Kadri, just to keep with you here, how can the city deliver for its residents a better public transit service? What are some of your ideas?
Well, public transit should be a right for everybody to take it. And again, I go back to the premise. We're the capital of a G7 nation, and we're not on par of any of those big capitals. We're not London, we're not Paris, we're not Rome. I teach executive classes at the Academy of Diplomacy in London, and not only once I took a taxi in London. Every other time I took the tube, and people take it because it's reliable and there is high ridership in there. So what we need to look at in Ottawa is mainly to make the public transit, mainly LRT and the bus system, more reliable to take the people from they were want to go to where they are going, and most importantly, to have that on time. I've spoken to riders, to drivers in the police service. I've had a group of my students go and do a field study on about 10 years ago, and they had recommendation on how to have a more effective bus routing and scheduling, and still the same issues are here today, 10 years later. We need to invest money in scheduling. We need to invest money in other aspects that have to do, for instance, reviewing the routing, optimizing the routing. I'm against free public transit completely. This is something that should be a future thing that we aspire for, not something that we have immediately. We can have pilot projects for free public transit, for instance, for seniors or for people below the poverty line. That's one thing that we can do on. But in order to increase the usage, we need to realize that reliability is the number one thing that people ask for, and then by increased ridership, we can do a lot of other things. So it's an economies of scale approach that we need to look at when it comes to.
Thank you, Mr. Kadri. Thank you, Mr. Kadri. I'm just going to move along to Mr. Singh here. Mr. Singh, I don't want to have to repeat. The problems are well known. How does the city deliver better public transit for its residents?
I think fundamentally we have to go to the core of what the issues are. There's an issue with scheduling. There's an issue with reliability. There's an issue with affordability. So I've spoken to a lot of people within OC Transpo, and if we can improve on scheduling, if we can improve on reliability, if we can start using proven solutions that meet the city's requirement needs and harsh environment, and start utilizing those as solutions in regards to either when it comes to repairing LRT or even buses, I think we're that much better ahead, and we can improve just city service, just OC Transport by 50%, and we haven't even injected any new money into it. We keep buying buses and keep saying we're going to buy electric buses, and we have more LRT trains coming in light rail, but none of them meet the city's requirement needs, and we don't even have the infrastructure for electric buses yet. It's nice to have them, but we have to make sure those electric buses are going to work as efficiently in the summertime and as wintertime.
So you're worried about the type of vehicles that we're buying and whether they're up to the task in winter, for example, Mr. Singh. Is that right? Or?
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, electric buses, like electric vehicles, we need to charge them. And some of the routes that we're currently using are long routes. We don't even have the infrastructure yet put in place to recharge those buses. And I'm not for one that would go for the cheapest tender out there. And not for the expensive one either. If we're going to do this, we have to do it right and make sure that any new fleet coming in, whether electric, hybrid, or light rail, meets the needs of the city.
What do you think about free transit?
The city has.
What do you think about free transit, Mr. Singh? Free transit.
I don't believe in free transit. If we do free transit, someone's paying for it.
All right, gotcha.
I think we can make it affordable, and we can make Equipass affordable, and we can lower transit rate eventually. But in order to do that, we need to increase ridership. And in order to increase ridership, we need to have a system that's on time, reliable, and until such time that happens, there's Band-Aid solutions for now that we can use. But in order to have long-term solutions, we need to fix what's fundamental fundamentally wrong with OC Transpo, which is the on-time issues and the reliability issues right now.
Mike Maguire, big problems with public transit. OC Transpo, $700 million a year to run OC Transpo.
Yeah.
It took my producer to get from Nepean to Thurston Drive this morning an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's only because he was having car trouble. If his car was okay, he would not ride the bus for an hour and 45 minutes to get to work in the morning. Who would? So what do we do about this? Mike Maguire?
Two issues. I see two issues to be addressed. I like the comments both by Param and by Nour. There's a service problem. This is caused by the necessity, the city's perceived necessity to cancel OC Transpo routes to drive people to the LRT, to make the LRT look like a success. This proved to be a disastrous idea, and it's resulted in exactly what Param was just saying. People, I'm not going to get on the bus, and they don't. So until the idea is restoring OC Transpo routes where ridership demand exists, that's absolutely must happen. The LRT, we've got to try and make the LRT work for us. It's been enormously challenging, as you're well aware. I've been proposing putting commuter rail service back on existing track right now that's in use from Canada to the train yards and only needs 4 more kilometers of track to go to just below Orleans. Why not put a commuter rail service in there? It would be so inexpensive compared to these monstrous LRT billion-dollar budgets, and it's just such a sensible thing. Wanted to add one other thing, though. You mentioned buses and the types of buses. This whole idea of electric buses, the city plans to purchase $55 million worth of electric buses in the next budget. I just cannot support this kind of expenditure at this time.
Okay.
And it's a small part of the overall energy evolution document, which the city has adopted already, which calls for $57 billion expenditures on the environment.
Yeah, but I believe isn't most of the money there, Mr. Maguire, coming from this infrastructure bank, Canada Infrastructure Bank, to buy these buses?
There's a grant application in place. Let's assume we get the grant application. That's
right.
Great.
Well,
we've got 4 more years of bus buying to go.
Okay. We only have about 5 minutes left. I would really like to ask you, because in the last term of council and the term before that, well, for most of the Watson years, it seems for the residents, because, they were reelected, the councillors were reelected, the mayor was reelected, inflation was a good, basically standard for a property tax increase, the rate of inflation or the cost of living. But now inflation right now is at 7%. I don't know too many people who will accept a 7% property tax increase. So what's an acceptable property tax increase, say, on an annual basis? Mike Maguire, very quickly, Mike Maguire.
Sure. Last year's budget surplus was $900 million. I can't support a property tax increase when it's returned. This year's surplus would be about $600 million. We need to take a break. For the very first year of the new council, there needs to be no property tax increase. We need to reassess program by program because the spending has gotten out of control. There needs to be a justification for the massive programming spending of the city.
Okay. Mr. Singh.
Yes.
Property tax increase. Give me a.
I think if we start freezing or cut property taxes, we're cutting services one way or another. I also don't agree with following the rate of inflation at 7%. I think that would be irresponsible on every level. I don't want to put more families on the streets because of inflation, or for something that the city is going to do. So I think we can come up with something that's balanced and equitable. Okay. But we have to make sure that the budget that's going to be proposed is balanced and equitable and makes sense. But I don't agree with 7% either. So,
Mr. Kadri.
Before I give you a number up, I want to give you some synopsis into these things. The city now has a lot of budget budgetary pressures. There are 13 unions who have negotiated collective agreements over the next many years. Okay. So there are increases on salaries, and that makes up a big part of the budget. There are a lot of things that the city is paying in terms of inflationary aspects. So we've got ambulances that are running on gas. We've got the buses that are running on gas. There is hydro rates that are up. So all of these things that the city is also going to be paying, and it's going to be under the same pressure that the people are going in terms of the budgets because of its spending. But nobody will accept the 7% increase. What I plan to be is I want to be an inflation buster, and our numbers are going to be at the 2%, and we're going to realize efficiencies of the rest 5 to 6% by reassessing all kinds of projects that we have and making sure that we realize the efficiencies that we need, not cutting the services.
Inflation buster. I like the sound of that. I think everybody likes the sound of that, an inflation buster. Okay. We only have about 2.5 minutes left, so why don't we end maybe something on a lighter note. What is this like for you to be out there running for mayor? And, you know, it's in the news media. I'm certainly guilty of it. You know, they mention the front runners, and you're not them. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe you don't think you're getting a fair shake. I'm just curious. What's the journey like? Mike Maguire, what's this journey like right now?
This is my third time, so somewhat familiar. I was the runner-up in 2014. Mr. Watson beat me. What's it like? I don't think the news media owe me anything. It's my job as a candidate to go out and make news for you folks to cover it. I've got over 70,000 people on social media. Wow. I'm doing A-OK.
All right. Mr. Singh, what's it like to run for mayor?
You know, this is my first time running for mayor or running for politics. So you live and learn a lot of things as you go. And it could be somewhat overwhelming sometimes. I've had to do a lot of reading, research. I try not to give out fluff answers or polished answers. I speak from the heart. Yeah. And I've been listening to the population for the last 20 years as boots on the ground police officer. So, you know, I've had this unique experience of listening and understanding the issues that are at hand. So, but when it comes to media coverage, you know, like Mr. Maguire said, at the end of the day, we're the ones pushing our platforms out there. So, and, you know, it's picking up now, and I appreciate that. But, you know, if it doesn't pick up, then I'm boots on the ground and making headway by knocking at doors and meeting people at community events. All right. So,
in a minute or less, Mr. Kadri, what's it like to run for mayor?
We're putting our name there, and we're reaching to the people. I ran a shadow campaign for about 3 months, and now things are heating up big time. Over the last 24 hours, we've got 6 media interviews lined up. So people are starting to pay attention. Actually, one of the major media outlets apologized for not giving me the coverage that I deserve after giving them an op-ed. So things are going into a heat spot. We participated in 3 debates, and in the last debate, I was chosen one of the top 5 to be in those debates. So people are seeing that there were the 3 front runners, but there is this rising star that is edging to the front too, and this is Nour Kadri, and we're in a spot that we're happy about it now.
Okay. Hey, good luck to all 3 of you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob.
Have a good one.
Yep. Nour Kadri, Param Singh, Mike Maguire. They're all running for mayor. I'm running out of here, making way for Sam LaPratte on the Rob Snow Show. This is City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Tune in weekdays starting at 9 on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
What are we doing about COVID? Seems like the communications have been all about how everything's opening up, and yet here in Ottawa we're experiencing our 7th wave, so a bit of a contradiction there.
On Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa, we'll tell you all about the Festival of Small Halls. They have a great lineup this year happening throughout Eastern Ontario. We'll give you all the details on that. And Flora Brewing Company is celebrating their 5th anniversary. Owner David Longbottom will join us on the show. We'll tell you all about the celebrations they have planned, and maybe we'll even sample, I don't know, a couple of beers. All that and more on Tuesday's Daytime Ottawa.
Putting the focus on smaller businesses and less larger sized businesses, as it's very different for people like me that are like literal small business owners, where we've bootstrapped money and we don't have a lot of funding, and to be able to help us through that. There has been some help for us, but I think it would be a greater opportunity to see us thrive through the next couple of years.